Good evening. This is Triple C TV, the place where adults love to be. How is everyone this evening? It is December the 8th, 2017, 9 o'clock on the dot p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How are all of the beautiful people today? It's me. I'm awesome. Make sure I'm not on mute. Because I do that sometimes. Let me get the preliminaries out of the way. Farooq.
No, it's Malik.
Oh, hey, Malik, you done changed your screen. You done changed your avatar on me. Soup Bone, ain't seen you in a minute. Jesus. Trying to see about posting this. Is it raining down there where you at?
No, it's
Okay.
it's God damn it, what is it? It's 78 degrees.
8 degrees. It's like 40 something here.
Yep, 78 degrees. That's the only thing I like out here is the weather. Other than that, I can suck a dick. I hate it.
Norma, shalom. Oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, we trying to get hooked up with Farooq. Okay, so now let me add. Farooq got a Yahoo email.
Oh, you found them?
Yeah, he responded back. I'm just trying to add him to the Hangout, but he got a Yahoo email.
Okay.
So first he have to accept it. But I don't think he accepted the right one.
Damn, I'm sitting there driving with no headlights on.
You better rectify that situation. Doran, shalom.
I'm sitting looking, I'm like, it's really dark.
Rising star, peace. It's snowing in Virginia. Hey, Philip. Okay. Okay, let's see how we're gonna get this done. Or maybe I need to do it like this. There we go. Add. Bam. Hopefully he gets it and pulls it up. Supreme Queen, peace. Okay, let's see if he gonna pop in. Melanated agenda. Bismillah. Oh, it snowed up where you at? Okay, while we wait for Farooq, everybody knows the setup pretty much. the regulars, and the regulars tell the new people so we don't have any issues. The email, if you want to ask a question, you send the email to the consciouscommunityconvo@gmail.com, and it will be answered from there. Truth forum, peace, conscious speculation. My eyebrow twitching. Siobhan, peace. There it goes. Farooq, I added him to the hangout, so he should be here in a minute. No McHorses tonight. No, I'm playing. But okay, so we're gonna have Malik and Farooq on, and they're gonna talk about, what are you guys gonna talk about?
Oh boy, this topic is the topic that I have been wanting to deal with in regards to who everybody knows is Dr. Malachi Z. York, who I call Dr. Pork. Um, the subject is basically that first of all, he was never a Muslim and he never taught correct Islam. And the reason why I've been wanting to tackle this subject is, though we all know that they are Nuwapians and they have gone through their various schools of thought, Islam was the first, as he calls it, his first school of thought that he went through. And so it's the foundation. Their various schools of thought. Islam was the first, as he calls it, his first school of thought that he went through. So it's like it's the foundation. Their various schools of thought. Islam was the first, as he calls it, his first school of thought that he went through. So it's like it's the foundation. That is. Their various schools of thought.
Farooq, you might need to cut your mic down a little bit and cut the video off.
Farooq. Okay, hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason being is that this is the foundation of the cult. The foundation of the cult was supposed Islam. And I I believe, I could be wrong, but I really believe that if people were informed about Islam when this guy came around, that one, there may have been people that still followed, but I don't believe that it would have grown to the magnitude that it grew. Um, an imam by the name of Bilal Phillips shut Dr. Pork down, and Bilal Phillips, his book that he wrote called The Answer Occult in America, is the reason why Dr. Pork um, stopped teaching Islam and moved on and began calling himself Rabboni Yeshua, which would be Rabbi Jesus or Rabbi Yeshua, and began teaching what he taught. I'm sorry.
Okay. Now my mic was messed up. It wouldn't come off mute. Hey Farooq, how you doing this evening? Farooq, you still there? You got your mic muted. There
Can
you
you hear
go.
me?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you now.
All right. So I'm working on the camera part of it, but I'm here.
Okay, we can see and hear you fine now.
Really. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, it's like Malik touched on the whole Dr. York and Law community. Uh, if more people were exposed to some of the correct teachings of Islam, it would not have grown as big as it did. And York actually did not grow as big as he did until he began to twist and synthesize a lot of the Islam that he began to taught, that he began to teach. Very early on in York's teachings, his Islam or his version of Islam was, I would say, about 80% what you would call orthodox or just traditional. It wasn't until he began to synthesize his own stuff from various people and places and his influence, which I hope I can get into tonight, as well as me and Abdul Malik. I do have a couple things that I want to present. And if you give me a second, if Malik could intro and lead up to things and give everything from his perspective, I'll be ready in a second.
Okay, Malik.
Okay, so as Brother Farooq was saying, that he taught an orthodox style of Islam. So um, basically, Islam consists of um, two things that the Muslim is to hold dear to with their life. And so those two things is the Quran and the Sunnah. The Sunnah means ways and actions, meaning what Prophet Muhammad said and what Prophet Muhammad did, how he did things, how he dealt with his wives, how he dealt with children, how he dealt with warfare, how he dealt with politics, how he dealt with education, how he reason why is because the Quran talks about saying that he's the best of examples onto mankind. And so Sunnah is, for example, if people lived in the time of Jesus and the scripture at that time revealed was the gospel, then Jesus had a sunnah. It's an Arabic word, but it's semantics. It just means what was the ways and actions of Jesus. You know, like Christians say, what would Jesus do? So this, in essence, is the sunnah. And the sunnah is collected into a book or books called hadiths. And there are sahih, which means sound hadiths. There's da'if, which means they're weak hadiths. And then you have fabricated hadiths. And so the sunnah is the application of the Quran. You cannot practice Islam at all without the hadiths, the sunnah. Why do I say that? There's 5 pillars to Islam. There's when they say the oneness of God, which is Tawheed. There's Salat, the prayer. There's Zakat, charity. There's Swam, fasting. And there's the Hajj, the pilgrimage. The Quran mentions these topics, these subjects, and these things, these rituals. But it does not explain how you do it. So you have to have the hadiths. How did the Prophet Muhammad pray? What was the conditions? What was the prerequisites that went into the salat, to the prayers? On and on and on, with all these different whether it's Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. How did the Prophet believe in Allah? Who was Allah to him, and who was Allah? Who is Allah Islamically? So Dr. Pork rejected the hadiths, and this is where he went very off. He was anti-hadiths, and he would teach things and say, "Oh, these are just the words of men." Yes, the hadiths of
You're breaking up a little bit.
so when you read a hadith, meaning that was his last wife, and Aisha narrated whatever, narrated Abu Bakr. So they use this argument that these are from men. Why take from them? Okay, so how do you pray? Because Islam teaches that prayer is the first thing that a Muslim is judged on the Day of Judgment. So how do you pray? What is the thing what is the conditions to the Shahada that leads to their first Salat? They have to have a witness, 2-3 witnesses, when they bear witness in the oneness of Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. They have to make what's called wudu, which is a form of cleansing themselves. If they committed a sexual act at some point before making the Shahada or taking the Shahada, then they have to perform, which is a form of cleansing yourself, but when you bathe. So there's many conditions of what they call fiqh, understanding to all these different things in this land.
Say that last part again, Malik.
Uh,
You still there?
yeah.
Okay. We got a
And
question too.
I just want to finish this point out.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want Farooq to do most of the talking because his Arabic is better than mine. And the Arabic is key. The Futa Arabic of the Quran, because that's classical Arabic, and that is an Arabic that Arabs do not even speak. It's an Arabic that has to be learned. And so this too is where the deviancy and the misunderstanding comes along, because they have no fiqh, they have no understanding of the Arabic. But the thing I just want to end out is that him calling himself the Ansar Allah community. The Ansars were a group of people that existed and lived in the city of Medina in Saudi Arabia. And when you read the history of the Prophet, whether it's Islamic sources, you will hear the story of how the pagan Arabs kicked him and his companions out of Mecca, where he first received revelation. And they fled to Medina. After the fact of when he sent some of his Sahaba to Abyssinia. So when they absolutely left Mecca, they went to Medina, and there was a group of people called the Ansars. And the Ansars, Ansar means aider. Allah means aiders of Allah. They aided the Prophet and the Sahaba because the people of Medina then and even to this day are known as hospitable, kind people. So they aided them with hospitality and allowed them to seek refuge in Medina. So what Dr. Pork did, the Ansars, now there is a sect in Islam known as the Ansars that exist. But these Ansars that still exist do not even remotely have the belief system that Dr. Pork taught when he was leading the cult then known as the Ansar Allah community. And so there's many things that this man taught that is absolutely 100% not Islam. He would be classified as a kafir, which means a disbeliever. He would be classified as a hypocrite. He would be considered uh, uh, a what's called bid'ah, innovation. So he would be considered the people of Ahl Bid'ah. This guy would be on the list of all the don'ts in Islam.
You still there, Malik?
Yeah, I muted it. I'm done. I don't want to talk too
Okay.
much.
I got a question for you. Did the New York City Muslims force Dr. Malik to flee to Georgia? His mama called him Dwight. His mama named him Dwight. I'm gonna call him Dwight. He ain't got no doctorate as far as I know.
He didn't even graduate high school.
They said that the New York City Muslims forced him out of New York and down to Georgia.
Well, yeah. I mean, and there were other communities, like Imam Siraj Wahaj, who is the imam in Brooklyn. Before coming to what is called the Sunnah, he was in the Nation of Islam, and he was then in the Wafdi Muhammad community. Wafdi Muhammad was the son of Elijah Muhammad. He's the one that left the teachings of the Bible. And then he left that to come to Orthodox Islam, because that's just the whole thing of technicalities of beliefs and stuff like that. But he made pamphlets that was first area, and so it was like the jig is up. When Bilal Phillips wrote that book, it was all she wrote.
Okay. If y'all got questions, send them to the email. Lordy. Okay, Farooq, you still there? Oh, there you go. Your mic muted, though.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? All right. So I'm going to pick up where Malik touched on a lot of issues. He went pretty quickly and thoroughly to this man called Dr. York by some, Dwight York. Just like you said, his mama named him Dwight. I call him Dwight. Now, a little bit of back information is needed on Dwight York. And tonight we're going to go through that piece by piece, addressing his community in which when he claimed Islam. Now, when we do this, we got to understand when York claimed to be Muslim, claimed Islam, this is, I would say, up to about 1993. Then he morphed onto something else. So the books in which I'm going to deal with are those previous books which York put out, claiming to be Muslims, claiming Islam, claiming to be a savior, claiming this and that. And one of those books is like this one. I don't know if you can see it very well. This is a Nubian Islamic Hebrew and Ansarullah community book. This is the true story of Noah right here, right? And one of the ways you can tell some of the York's older books, they begin from the right side, right? So they read sort of like Arabic books do, meaning they read from the right to the left. So his books and his publications, the early ones, read from right to left, though they were in English. All right, and that's one. I have several of them up here. His Arabic books, Societies Unmasked, Where and What is Hell, right? And you can, even from York's books, you can tell how things begin to change. And I'll go into that change in a few minutes. For example, this is the book of Leviathan. Now, this book is printed from left to right versus right to left from an older book, right? And you'll notice how they use the English alphabet. It's all in English. There is some Arabic in here, right? All right, well, let's go into the man, Dr. York, Dwight York. We have to understand that Dwight York was a troubled youth, right? He was a very troubled youth. From the time he reached his teenage years, he was caught up into a lot of gang activity, just being a wild and really young person, you know. I will say that Dwight York also caught a rape charge in the mid to late 60s, statutory rape charge. Now, this is also a point that needs to be remembered, because later on, his character re-emerges again as he develops his community, his cult. Dr. York is also arrested for possession of a firearm, or what is called a zip gun. A zip gun. Those you know may not be familiar what a zip gun is. A zip gun is a ad hoc or a homemade gun. Basically, you take a steel barrel, a spring, a nail, put a bullet in there with a trigger. It's basically a gun that you make, homemade, and you just simply use it, fire it like any other gun. Well, he was caught with that gun and arrested, and that too shows up in his criminal history, right? And for these charges right here, York did some time in prison. York did some time in prison, and then he got out. I would say around the late 60s, early 70s, York gets out of prison. Now, when he gets out of prison, this is when he now synthesizes his hustling, pimping, and Islam. He has a new hustle now. And now his new hustle is religion, in particular, Islam. Now, the beginnings of his community is sort of vague. There isn't much documentation that's still left other than the words of York written in his own publications, which a lot of times is difficult to take because he likes to inflate a lot of things about himself. But we do know from what we do have that his earliest works began in the early 70s, as he says, under a man by the name of Sheikh Dawood. Sheikh Dawood. Now, Sheikh Dawood is a very important person in Islam, in America, because it is Sheikh Dawood who is doing a lot of work in the Northeast as far as going out, propagating Islam, and carrying it out to different people. Now, York goes to this man, Sheikh Dawood, and studies under him for a little bit, gains some certificates, and then later uses these certificates to bolster himself, as if he's this learned person. He has this information and that information, not knowing. And the Wahabians will show you in their publications where Sheikh Dawood gave York certificates, right? But the thing is, these certificates were given out to anyone in the community, and various people have them still to this day. Still to this day. As a matter of fact, you can read about the same certificate, completion of a 3-week study course by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in his biography. He mentions it as well. And like I say, Sheikh Dawood was known throughout the Northeast, New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. He was a very influential person. Now, York at this time is sitting under the man, but the man, Sheikh Dawood himself, is not knowing that this man of this character, nor his background, is actually sitting underneath him a sheep in wolf's clothing. And York will show this side of himself with other people as well. All right, so we have Sheikh Dawood. All right, find my material that I have here on Sheikh Dawood. For those that may not know what Sheikh Dawood looks like, I'll bring it up from a picture that I have here. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. So this is Sheikh Dawood. And Sheikh Dawood was born in 1851, and he lived to 1980. Now I need the audience to keep up with these dates, because a lot of things happen within York's community upon the death of this man, Sheikh Dawood, which I'm going to try to touch on, which I am going to touch on today. All right. Here we have, there it is. You see the camera can get that very well. So that's a picture of Sheikh Dawood, Sheikh Ahmed Faisal Dawood, Dawood Ahmed Faisal. All right, man from Trinidad, an imam from Trinidad. All right, very, very influential. Now, while sitting underneath Sheikh Dawood, York's teaching as far as Islam goes, as far as the theology and what York is teaching, isn't much different than Orthodox Islam or just normative Islam. It isn't much different. I would say about 80 to 90% of it is the same. It isn't until Sheikh Dawood dies in the 80s that York now begins to change his teaching, add more esoteric elements to the teaching, add claims about himself to the teaching, and also really begins to add followers. Okay, it is after Sheikh Dawood dies that York really begins to gain new followers. And Sheikh Dawood dies in the 80s. In York, the height of York's popularity, or the biggest of his community, was under Islam during this period after Sheikh Dawood's death up until about 1993, 94. Okay. Now, Sheikh Dawood was very important in that he sort of kept York under control. York never wrote anything publicly denouncing Islam or some of the tenets of faith or what Muslims actually believe until after Sheikh Dawood's death. Now, upon his death, York started to transform his teachings. York began to speak about how he's from the Sudan. Go ahead.
What was the date, the birth date, the start date? Was it 1958? Or did you say another date?
Oh, as far as York's community or
the guy?
The guy. Sheikh Dawood was born, I have it written here. Oh, 1 second. Sheikh Dawood was born. Trying to find my notes on it. Give me 1 second, fam. Okay. Sheikh Dawood was born in 1891.
Okay.
All right. He was born, Sheikh Dawood was born Sheikh Dawood Ahmed Faisal. That's his name. And he died in 1980. 1980.
Okay. And there was a question that was sent in. What's the difference between the Hadith and the Quran? And what is the Hadith?
All right. All right. We're going to get into it. We'll get into it.
Okay.
We'll get into it later. Just simply write it down. We'll keep it as notes, and I'll get back to addressing it. Because it's an important topic, and many people who are familiar with your community during that time York make that a big issue about the Hadith, which is basically oral tradition. So let's get back to that. Let's get back to where I was as far as Sheikh Dawood. Sheikh Dawood was very important, which even York writes about Sheikh Dawood and how he raised him as a youth, raised him where York lived in the community. Sheikh Dawood visited York's community, the Ansar Allah community, during the festivals or the holidays, right? But the problem with this narrative that York teaches is that nowhere will you find York's picture in any of Sheikh Dawood's publications or any of the events, whether the pictures are by Sheikh Dawood's fellow students or fellow people of his community or Sheikh Dawood's wife, right? You can go online, right? You'll find many tributes to Sheikh Dawood, and I'll spell his name for those who may want to search it. You'll find many tributes that are done for Sheikh Dawood. You'll find many entries on the internet for Sheikh Dawood, but you'll see the old pictures and people who were part of the community who attended the masjid and whatnot, but you will not find York. Nowhere will you find York mentioned anywhere, any of this. All right. So let me just spell Sheikh Dawood's name out for those that want to Google search it. All right. So it is D-A-O-U-D, Dawood, Ahmed, A-H-M-A-D, middle name, last name, Faisal, F-A-I-S-A-L. All right. So for those who want to Google search it, I tried to spell it. I don't know whether or not you can see it on the board, but I'll bring the camera closer for those that want to see the actual spelling of it. So while York is simultaneously sitting underneath Sheikh Dawood, visiting here, visiting now, because we don't have any documentation for anything that York says that he actually lived with Sheikh Dawood. Meanwhile, York's community is a fledgling community in New York, Jersey, right? It's a small fledgling community that mostly comprises of his family, his brother, and his friends. It's a very small community. And this is how York's community actually begins to take off, right? Begins to take off. York is doing a lot of the work himself, which he states he's doing a lot of work himself, traveling and going back and forth. I do have testimony of people of how York used to come in other masjids and try to recruit people. But at some point in time, York and his family, specifically his brother, they break ties. They begin to break ties. And York begins to do his own thing with the followers that continue to follow him. Now, those followers that continue to follow him, you know, they love him. They want to follow him. They want to believe in what he's saying. Because Islam at that time, even it was widely accessible up north. You know, you could learn about the basics. And like I said, York at that time, 80 to 90% of what he was teaching in theology was normative Islam, just regular Orthodox Islam. Now, within Islam, there's lots of room for growth, right? There's lots of room for growth. A person can be a social activist and be Muslim. A person could be into feeding the homeless or teaching children or writing books or poetry or art and all these different things, right? So there's lots of room within Islam, and Muslims get involved in a lot of activities. And so these different activities, a lot of times people will say, well, this is that group and this is that group. But in theology wise, or what they believe, they're actually all the same. They're actually all the same. So you may have some group that's against oppression, or one group that wants to a sewing club or whatever, or into agriculture, right? It's not that they are different, they are the same group. Now, but when it comes to York's group, York is a little bit different. 80 to 90% of what he's teaching is normative Islam. The other 10 to 20% is his own thing. And it is York's own thing that gets him in trouble or causes rift with the other communities of Muslims that are living in the Northeast, right? And some of these own things in which York begins to teach very openly after Sheikh Dawood dies. For example, you must wear white. You must wear white. York takes this from York takes a quote from Matthew and a verse from the Quran, and he mashes them together. He just literally mashes them together and says, look, right here, it says, you must wear white or go to hell. Now, I know there's some Nubians that won't believe this, but I have the actual book. All right. And it's these beliefs right here where York begins to bump heads with other communities that where he's coexisting at, that begins to cause problems. One of the people that Brother Malik brought up, Bilal Phillips. Bilal Phillips was a Muslim brother who wrote a book, late 80s, exposing York. I believe around 89, 90, Ansar Cult book in America came out. And when that book hit, York felt it. York felt it in a lot of ways. Not only did he immediately leave Islam shortly thereafter, but York also legally changed his name at that point. And I'll get into the name change and what he changed it from and to a little bit later. But before Bilal Phillips, you have people like Malik mentioned, Siraj Wahaj. You had Imam Malik Abdul Majid. And these are two particular ones that I remember specifically. They circulated around the community in New York City, right, warning people to be on guard for York and his community and some of the things he teach. They had to do this because 80 and 90%, right, if you wasn't a scholar or well learned within Islam itself, you could get trapped up, because not only were there differences in differences than normative Islam that York was teaching, there were also rumors of York's misconduct going around and circulating within the city. It was just simply Bilal Phillips who exposed it. And I have to find the actual book, but in Bilal Phillips records testimony of male and female members of York's community. He records the testimony, and in Bilal Phillips' book, you can read them, how York used and abused people, how York mandated men and women live separately, how York mandated each person bring in a certain amount of income. And these rumors, and these are actually actual facts, these rumors, as they began to come to the forefront, the other Muslims in the community up in New York and the other boroughs and other cities put out a flyer, a bulletin, which I have. I had to find it. I had to dig in the crates for everyone for it, which was given out in the communities to watch out for these guys. They sound nice, but they're not. They sound like good people, but they're not. And eventually, the truth about York does come out, especially when Bilal Phillips' books does drop. All right. So without getting too far ahead, now let's get back. I'm gonna back it up a little bit, just a couple years, and we're gonna get to this time in which Sheikh Dawood dies. York's community begins to mobilize, begins to gain influence, gain followers, begins to accelerate. York is now beginning to reach the plateau of, or the apex of, where his community has ever achieved. After about 1993, 95, 96, the community really goes downhill, slowly, gradually, and then just sharply peaks in his rock bottom. So Sheikh Dawood dies. That leaves a void in the community, right? From Sheikh Dawood's legacy, you get another movement which is called Dar Islam. For the sake of the, I'm going to keep much of my talk in English. In Arabic that I will be using is some keywords for just simply for the understanding. So you have Dar Islam, which literally translate as the place of Islam or the abode of Islam. It's sort of like a mantra title in which the community just chose for itself. All right, not that it is the place for Islam. As Muslims, they don't do such things like that. Just like we say, you know, my house is the place for Islam, or I am the best of believers. No, we don't do such things like that. So this void that Sheikh Dawood leaves within the community of Orthodox Muslims, York tries to fill it, and in trying to fill it, he's now trying to court the Nation of Islam, 5%ers, Orthodox Muslims who may not be of most knowledgeable, Hebrew Israelites, Rastas. York is now trying to grab and grasp everyone in which he can. Everyone. If Sinetta was around, if Sinetta's community as he stands today was around during those times, York would have just tried to take everything as his own, because he didn't care. The man had no respect for the actual teachings of a people, their history, their struggles, or anything. York would literally, culturally, he's basically a cultural vulture. He would literally appropriate for himself of a people with no respect to their history or anything. So now York is trying to fill the void which is left open. So now this is when York begins to get into more of the esoteric. He's trying to make himself esoteric. He's trying to make himself seem more grander than he actually is. This is when he begins to take on more titles, more names. He's expecting more reverence paid onto him. It is after Sheikh Dawood dies that York is now claiming the Sudan and being from the Mahdi family, right? And as my brother Malik mentioned, there is a group, and there is a community of Ansars, Ansarullah, Jamaat Ansarullah in Sudan. Jamaat meaning community or group, has a Jamaat of Ansars in the Sudan. Now, these people are the legitimate members of the group as well as those of the family. These people are. York tries to assimilate that and bring it back, well, not literally, but bring it to the United States and make himself the center figure. He now places himself as being born in Sudan. He's no longer from Boston, Massachusetts. He is now born in the Sudan, and his mother had sex with the president and gave birth to him. I know it's kind of hard to believe, but yes, this is what York states. His mother had sex with the president and gave birth to him. Now, I have it on authority of Muhammad Ahmed, right? Muhammad Ahmed is the brother that I speak with. He is on Facebook, Muhammad Ahmed al-Mahdi. You can speak with him on Facebook, and he is part of the Ansar community of the Sudan. And he has told me, from him to myself, that he personally delivered the message from the Ansars of the Sudan that York is to cease and desist from his teachings of having any part of the Sudan, any relationship with the Sudan, the false teachings that he's teaching and whatnot. All right. And you can also hear the same message by the Amir of the Ansar Allah Jamaat of Sudan, Philip Sudan. And he too is on Facebook and is approachable, and you can contact him. And his name is Imam Qari Yusuf Al-Mahdi Al-Sharif. All right. Al-Ahmed, my bad. Let me say it again. Imam Qari Yusuf Ali Ahmed Al-Sharif. If anyone wants to ask later on for the spelling of any of those names so that they may contact them, just send the questions. All right. And I'll give the spelling for them. Now, Imam Yusuf Ali, Imam Khair Yusuf Ali, he is the present day Amir of the Ansars in the West, meaning here in America. He has been given authorization by those in Sudan to represent them. York never had any of these sort of credentials. York cannot show any of these sort of credentials. York cannot provide any documentation other than some pictures, traveling to Sudan, traveling to Egypt, and just standing there like a tourist, taking pictures with whomever he can take pictures with. Likewise, when some of the family from the Sudan, specifically Saeed Sadiq, came to New York, York used that as a photo op to take pictures with him in order to show his legitimacy. In order to show his legitimacy. Now, Imam Qari, who is the present day Amir of the community here in America, he has said that during that time that York would visit the Sudan, or even when Saeed Sadiq, once a prime minister of Sudan, visit York's community, it was, one, out of curiosity, two, out of appreciation, and three, out of ignorance. They did not know what exactly York was teaching. But when they did find out, they cut him off. And the brother Muhammad Ahmed, whom I referenced the first time, he was the brother that personally stepped to York personally and said, cease and desist. Now, the brother Muhammad Ahmed also says that for a little while, York straightened up. He straightened up some of his teachings, but it didn't take long until York then again begins to deviate and goes off into his own little world for his own purposes. Right? So that's the Sudan. Remind you, York does not begin to form his own theology until after the passing of Sheikh Dawood. Now, some of the things in which York begins to teach, which I will cover, that are completely false in Islam, is, right, bring up a couple examples here. I'm gonna take it from this book. Where's the Tabernacle of the Most High? Right, it doesn't have a cover. I lost the cover someplace, but anyone from your community can recognize that this is indeed a book from York Loves Pictures. Anybody from York's community can recognize this is indeed one of York's books right here. And then York has a lot contained in this book, which this page right here is the Suhuf. I'm gonna get into that as well, what the Suhuf is. All right, this is definitely one of York's books. And so just simply going through one of York's books, I can break it apart and show you where York has just literally disrespected what Islam actually teaches, right? And just gone off on his own. The first one, which is on page 66 of this book, and I'll quote it. Page 66. Right? York says, you do have to wear white. You do have to live in a community. Right? These are some of York's teachings. In Orthodox Islam, there is no such thing. There is no such thing. Community. Community as in the context in which York presents it. His community is fill out this application. Let me see your health records. Let me see your criminal records. And by the way, all females send a picture, right? And brothers, you can send one, is optional, right? But York literally asked for pictures as you filled out your application and sent it in, so you can be whether or not you can be accepted or not. Make sure you have any diseases or any troubled background. When actually many times none of that was really important, right? But we have here, and I'm quoting York in the first person, you do have to wear white. You do have to live in the community. Now, this is one of these quotations where, like I said, York is synthesizing. Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12, verse 5 through 8. And the Quran, second chapter, verse 32. Right? And in this synthesis, York is reading from the Old Testament of Genesis, where it says that after leaving Egypt, Moses and Aaron dwelled in the land in Canaan as a community. As a community. Now, York deliberately takes this out of context, right? In order to bolster his position. And York also takes some of the history of the Prophet Muhammad, as Malik was alluding to, and how the Prophet Muhammad, when he first began to preach and teach, was in Mecca, and then he migrated to Medina, and they lived as a community. Now, the context of those two references that York gives on page 66 is in reference to a people traveling, and then for the sake of safety, or for the safety, security, or just simply because they are alike in many ways. They live together in proximity. They live together in proximity. That is not what York is teaching. Likewise, the context of this, you will not find this today practiced by anybody who may claim to be Christian, Jew, Hebrew, Israelite, or Muslim. We don't live like that. Those two verses are contextual. York intentionally takes them out of context in order to form his community. And bear in mind, his community, York's, is nothing like that of Sheikh Dawood's. Sheikh Dawood's community and the other communities around the world today and during that time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, no one lived together in a compound like York was proposing. No one. They didn't do that. As a matter of fact, you'll find verses in the Quran where they go, Ar-rijal qawwamuna an-nisa, right? Ar-rijal qawwamuna an-nisa. Men are the maintainers of women. Now, the context of this is men are the head of the households. Men are the providers and protectors of women. Specifically speaking, first, domestically. Domestically, that means your wife. That means your daughters. That would extend to your immediate family, right? Providing and looking out for them. It's not an unheard of thing. But what York is asking for is much more. And this is one of the problems in which York has when it comes to the communities of other Muslims in the area. What York is asking for is devotees. York is asking for you to move in, live in the compound, work for him, slave for him, do him, please him, and then you'll get to heaven. Literally, I have the quotes from York. And then you will get to heaven. Then your name will be written in the book of the Lamb. Then you will be recognized by the Most High. Then you will be of the 144,000 that will be raised up to Zion. Well, Zion is where they will depart from. And York specifically says, not the Zion of the east, but the Zion of the west, upstate New York. All right. I want to give Malik a chance to come in. I don't want to take up too much because I can just continue to go on. I got a couple things I want to go over, and I hope to share.
Okay, well, we had a question for you. Were you a follower of Dwight?
Okay, all right. Good question. All right. Let me give a little background of myself. I was a Nuwabian. Current context, an Ansar, Nubian Hebrew, Nubian Islamic Hebrew. All these names of York's community are synonymous. They're basically all the same. All right. I was a member. I was a member for about 10 years, from the late 80s up until early 80s. Early 80s until about 1990. I would say 96. It's kind of difficult to pinpoint when I actually left because you leave physically the community, but it takes a little while for some of the mental junk to actually get out your head. You know, when you actually, okay, I'm done with them. Now, my position in the community, I was a regular foot soldier like everyone else. Most of the time, I got out there, put in the work, brought home, tried to bring home the requirements, $50, $100 a day, just like everyone else. At a certain point in time in the community, with the whole let's move to down south, and before they moved down south, they actually did a dry run down south, specifically here in Florida. I helped set up communities here in Florida. Drove one of York's personal students, someone who was very close to him. I was his driver and assistant, and helped collect money and this and that. So I'm very familiar with York community, very, very familiar. Now, as far as myself personally, before I became interested in York, I was a student of knowledge, just like everyone else, a student of knowledge. Wherever I can find it, I read it. Wherever I can find it. I was in high school. Into my high school year, graduating, going into college. Actually quit school in order to fully commit to the community. In the beginning, I was halfway in, halfway out, but later on, moving in, right, into the community. I personally have not been in the physical presence of York. I have been in the presence of some of York's wives, some of his children, some of the brothers who have been part of the community before me. I personally have been in their presence and learned things as an Ansar from them. Are there any other questions about myself?
No, we got another question, but it's more about Dwight.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, it's two of them actually. First one is, how did York respond to being denounced by the Sudanese?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, York's response was basically, we don't need them. We don't need them. His response was kind of subtle. It began kind of slow, almost an Ansar apologetic. He began to write publications about how we are different, The Ansars in the West are different from the Ansars in the East. And then he begins to ramp it up, how the Ansars of the Sudan have been corrupted. He then begins to write things about basically, by the time he walks his way back out of the whole Ansar of the Sudan of the West thing, by the time he walks himself back out of that hole he dug for himself, he has completely left Islam at this point. But during the time in which he claimed Islam, right, and also claimed to be Hebrew, because that was the stage in which York used in order to leave Islam, to become Hebrew proper, not Hebrew Islamic, not Nubian Islamic Hebrews, but Nubian Hebrews. We dropped the Islamic title. So York basically said, hey, screw y'all, we don't need y'all. We different. We different over here. And I'm gonna show you we different. One monkey don't stop no show. We're gonna do our own thing. And that's how he pretty much handled it. He did not reply back to the Ansars. He did not send. He did not try to reestablish connections with those in the Sudan. He basically just cut it off. So all those other years in which York promoted how he's so close and he's intertwined in the blood just basically went out the window. And for most of the followers, they didn't think anything of it. They didn't think anything of it at all. I'm going to show you how far York went to make himself seem legitimate as far as being an Ansar and of the Sudan. Like I said, the first thing in which he did, trying to establish his legitimacy, was saying that his mom got on a plane, was in Egypt for studies, doing some sort of foreign land studies, studying abroad. And while she was in Egypt, met a man who was then to be the president of Sudan, met a man and had sex with this man and became pregnant. Now, the timeline in which York claims his mom got pregnant, had the baby and everything, makes his mom look real bad. York makes his mom look like a slut. Not only does he make the president of Sudan also put shade on him, makes him look bad as well, but York does not have any problem throwing anybody under the bus, be it his mom, his brother, his father, anyone, or even those who served him in the community. So I'm gonna take it there just for a moment. York's mom has a child at the time in which York gives the date, and this child is only a couple months old when York claims his mother traveled to the Sudan, right? And according to York's version of the story, his mom becomes pregnant, gives birth, June 26, 1945, right? And if we go back in the dates and we adjust for the gestation period in which is required for a woman to carry a child and give natural birth, a natural term birth, 9 months, we will see that York's mom had to have landed in Egypt, and within the first 1 or 2 weeks had to hook up with this man, had sex, and got pregnant. And so now York supposedly comes from this lineage, supposedly. Now York never provides any family tree in his publication to any of his relatives other than one man, Saeed Sadiq, a former prime minister, head of state of Sudan, who wasn't even a prime minister when he did visit New York City and stopped by York's Ansar Allah community. York does not provide pictures for any of his other stepbrothers, cousins, aunts, nieces, nephews, any of the legitimate family tree, a legitimate family reunion like you and I would have, when everyone shows up for that family reunion, except Saeed Sadiq. right? And there's a lot of things that York makes up and claims of how come he never used this claim back in the 60s, back in the early 70s, blah, blah, blah. How come you using this claim after Sheikh Dawood dies? This, that, and the other. And York says, well, I couldn't use those names because the family name would have got you killed back in those days. Now, this too is a lie. This too is a lie, right? Because York, the Mahdi family, right? Starting from 1952, you have Abdel Ar-Rahman Al-Mahdi, right? He's the head of the country of Sudan. He's the president. For all terms, we'll call him the president. After him, in 1964, you have El-Khatim Al-Khalifa, right? In 1964. He too is an Ansar. He is from the Ummah Party. The Ummah Party is the political wing of the Ansar Allah community in the Sudan. After Al-Khatim Al-Khalifa in 1964, you have Abdullah Al-Fadil Al-Mahdi. Al-Mahdi. Now here's another person from the Mahdi family using his family name, not afraid to put it out there, in 1965. And you have Sadiq Al-Mahdi, the so-called cousin of York, who isn't. He was in power in Sudan from 1966 to 1967, and then again in 1986 to 1989. And then you also have a man by the name of Muhammad Ahmed Maqoob, right? He too is an Ansar from the political wing of the Ummah Party in 1969. So at no point in time was the Ummah Party or the Ansar Allah community in the Sudan or the Mahdi family name ever in jeopardy, ever had to take refuge because, you know, they were hunting them down and trying to kill them. No, that's just simply an excuse that York used to lie to his followers. Like I say, when Sheikh Dawood dies, now York can get it. Now York can just go buck wild with whatever he wanted to teach because the old Sheikh kept him in check. Kept him in check and watched him. Watched him. York couldn't lie while the man was living. It's only after his death. And likewise, York does that. On the dead, York tells a lot of lies. A lot of lies. Quickly, in order to make himself look better, in order to make himself look grander than he is, actually. And I hope that answers the question. York just simply said we didn't need them. We're different. They do their thing, we do our thing over here. You said you had a second question.
Yeah, it said, would York still be relevant in 2017 if he was free?
No, not at all. Not at all. York would not be relevant. One of the things that allowed York to use Islam, right, was that York came out and the height of his community and much of what he taught and his popularity was before the age of the internet. Before the age of the internet. So people didn't really have accessibility to a lot of teachings and parallel studies and this and that. So in 2017, York would literally burn up. He would literally burn up in his tracks. Soon as he come with that pseudoscience, soon as he come with he's gonna teach Islam or teach the Metanetter or teach about Assyrian or he's gonna teach about Mesopotamian culture, he would lose all his legs from underneath him. York could not. Now many Nuwabians would like to say no. York used to do debates early on in AOL and in the chat rooms, but that's nothing. That was the very beginning years of the internet. That's in a closed forum, and the sisters, the mates, the wives, and the sisters that supported York during those chat rooms, right? They were feeding him answers and what to say and what not to say. And if I'm correct, even sometimes that wasn't even York speaking. because York had a habit of using other members in the community works as his own, right? And Chuck Morgan can attest to that as well, because York used a lot of his work and publication for his own. Chuck never got paid for it like a lot of other people. But as far as relevancy in 2007, look, York would have literally committed suicide if he got out there. He would literally commit suicide. There's too much information. The conscious community be running him around in circles. He literally would be the sparring partner in the conscious community, like Nuwabians are today. They literally are just merely the sparring. That's who you spar with, you know, until you get your resume up to par, to actually take the stage on a formal platform to exchange idea on an open discussion or a debate. Now, York, even in his days, York likes to say, well, you know, Dr. York, he debated everyone. He left his front door wide open. You could come and you could ask him questions, and you could debate him, and he answered all the questions, and no one can defeat him. That too is a lie. That too is a lie. Yes, York left the door open for anyone to come in, but that means come in his community, on his ground, on his turf, on his platform, and debate or ask questions. Not all the debates or discussions got taped and released. They didn't. Only the ones that showed York in favorable light. And York didn't always take the stage as well. Other brothers would simply take the stage, answer questions. When York felt like coming out and to discuss the matter, he would. He would. Or he would say something. And 2017, I can tell you this. York was to get out and jump on the scene on the conscious community or any community. He would wish he was back in Supermax. He would wish he was back in Supermax. He would be exposed so quickly and he would look so badly, it would just literally be a shame. Now, what York does to himself concerning Islam, grabbing it, twisting it, making it his own, it's nothing new. It's nothing unique. York does the same thing when it comes to Christianity, when it comes to Judaism, when it comes to teaching about Rastafarianism, when it comes to teaching about ancient Egyptian culture, Medaneter, when it comes to teaching about South American indigenous culture and their tradition. York hijacks all of that, steals what he wants, creates his own narrative, and then puts it out. So at no point at any time could York take the stage and debate anyone from any of those respective communities and debate them one-on-one. He can't. Neither in Islam, neither in Christianity, neither in Judaism, Mesopotamian culture, Egyptology, the Medaneter, any of those things. So York literally has no relevancy today in 2007, and this is why the Nuwabians look the way they look now, out of place, out of sync, and out of time. You have any other questions?
Yeah, it was one asking, do you think York's ever been incarnated with beings?
I guess the question is addressed to me. Did York ever make the claim, or do I believe that?
Do you think that? I think, hold on, let me scroll back up and reread it. Do you think?
Oh, no. I do not believe or think York has ever been incarnated by beings. Now, within Islam, right, we do believe in spirits, right? Very much like a lot of indigenous cultures do. believe in spirits or influential forces. I would say York appears from his action. He looks like a man that is possessed. He acts and carries himself like a man who is possessed. Uh, he has no respect for culture. He has no respect for his followers. He has no respect for women. Uh, he has no respect for those that came before him, the ancestors. He has no respect for them. The question itself, do I believe that York has been incarnated, is subjective. It's a subjective question based upon my own observation. Um, I generally, when speaking about York, try to stick to the objective questions, not so much the subjective ones. But I personally, no, I don't believe he is anyone of grandeur. Anyone. Anyone. He's not El Cooked. He's not. He's not. He's not none of those beings of grandeur that he talks about. Now, what I will say is those beings that York talks about in his books as being the evildoers or the fallen or the transgressors and people like that, those beings that York writes in his books, York is writing about himself. York is writing about himself. And when you read York's books, if anyone out there has a chance to get to maybe some of his older publications or even his older publications, because the newer ones is just junk. It's just simply sophistry. But if you have a chance to get to some of his older stuff, you'll see York is literally talking about himself. Literally talking about himself. So he really is snitching on himself, even way back then. But people were too caught up in his esoteric and charisma to want to acknowledge it. But myself, no, I don't believe he's anything special.
Okay. So the last question was, somebody said they was around then also. They said, where did York get the idea of the surahs in Al-Quran being out of sequence?
That's a good one. All right, I'll take that one. And this is sort of, that question is sort of related to the oral tradition within Islam. This oral tradition, hadith, hadith is basically the Islamic terminology for it. The oral tradition. Within the science, hadith is basically the word which is used for the oral tradition. Right? York's concept, not concept, but York's publication and writing about the Quran being out of sync, not in its correct order, right? This actually comes from Muslims. This actually comes from Orthodox Islam, because it is the Muslims who actually have the record of the verses in which, when they were revealed, at what time and at what place. And the Muslims also have the record in which the Prophet dictated which verses are to be placed which chapters are to be placed together, which hezeb, where the hezeb begins and where it ends. So what York was doing, York was providing information to people who did not know, but calling it his own. Basically plagiarism, not taking the time and noting and telling and teaching the people where he learned it from, where it came from, or anything. So the history of what was the first verse is widely known. The Surah Alaq, Iqra Bismi Rabbika, right? This is the first verse. This is the first verse that was revealed to the Prophet, right? And Surah Fatiha, which is actually the first chapter in which you will which you see arranged. These are two different times, two different periods, and their arrangements and the knowledge of when they were arranged and how they were arranged and when it was revealed are both known by Muslim scholars. York didn't do anything other than take the information, make it a mystery, and then give it back to the people as if he the man, when actually he's not. And York has a habit of doing that, a habit. And this too is what also caused the problem with York in the community around, within the community of other Muslims up in New York in the Northeast, and as his community begins to grow. And this is concerning the oral tradition. Now, within Islam, you have the Quran, which is the book, the revelation given onto the Prophet Muhammad. And then you have the oral tradition of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, York made it a point to instill and drill into the people that the oral tradition of Islam needs to be cut off. Don't read it. Don't take their words, take mine. Right? Now, at the same time, York is trying to cut off the oral tradition within Islam. He's replacing it with his own tradition. He's replacing it with his own statements. He's replacing it with his own thus says the Lamb, which is a book. York's own actual oral tradition, Hadith, where he says, thus says the Lamb, meaning York. And York does that in many other publications. For example, York tells the men, don't grow your beard like this. Let me just use mine. Don't grow your beard like this. Grow your beard like, because you're imitating Orthodox Muslims. Grow your beard like this. The goatee with the slender connection around the jawline up into the forehead, right? And this is called the Midian cut, right? York advises them and tells them from his own oral tradition to do this and to do that. Meanwhile, it is in the oral tradition within Islam that you begin to learn how to pray. You begin to learn how to make Hajj, treat one another's. You learn at, I said we're going to keep it English. You learn manners. You learn etiquette. You learn, there's many things in which you learn from the oral tradition accompanied by the Quran. York cuts them off from that. And by doing so, York is now able to make up his own rules. Make up his own rules, in which within Islamic sciences is called Sharia. York begins to make up his own rules. You can have more than one wife. York begins to marry mother, sister, and daughter, which is completely forbidden within Islam. I speak upon this just very briefly. Matrilineal marriages within Islam is forbidden. Matrilinear, meaning maternal, linear, meaning going from on the women related maternal side. You cannot marry the mother, the daughter, the sister, and the aunt. You can't do it, right? You can't do it. It's explicitly forbidden. But York does such a thing. York does such a thing because he has cut people off from the oral tradition in which the Prophet has said this or he said that. His wives, the Prophet Muhammad's wives, said this and said that concerning female issues. Now, the Prophet Muhammad was a male, but concerning female issues, the Prophet Muhammad didn't have a menstruation, did not breastfeed. So there's a lot of issues in which the Prophet instructs concerning female issues or collective issues or social issues. Right? And so by doing so, York creates this own stigma about himself. He creates this stigma about the oral tradition, and now in 2017, the Nuwabians are ripping and running around here talking about they follow the oral traditions of their ancestors. Niggas, get out of here. Really, get out of here. You make one statement and now you're contradicting yourself later on. But concerning the order of the Quran, the order in which it was put together in a book, right? The Mus'haf, the Quran itself, the order in which it was put down, That is already written on paper. We have the historical record, how and when it took place. Likewise, when the first verse was revealed, that too is also historically recorded within the oral tradition within Islam, within the oral tradition of Islam. But for those who don't have it, the only place you can possibly get it from is from York, as he makes up his own story, his own version of it. Sorry, I went on a little bit too long on that one.
Oh, it's no problem. So somebody wanted to know how many languages you spoke.
All right. Uh, I can tell you, it is not 19. I do not speak 19 languages like many Nuwabians claim York speak, or Prince York likes to boast about where he's getting to. He's at 17, 16, 17. He's working on 19. I do not speak 19 languages. I speak English. First and foremost, I speak English. Uh, I speak, if you want to consider it a language, pidgin language. I speak Gullah as well. I'm Geechee. My wife is Haitian, so I speak a little Creole. I learned Arabic, right? I did learn Arabic. I'm my studies and learning of Arabic is continuing. I don't say I'm a master of Arabiya Luga, but I do speak and read it. I had some years, I think in college, in high school or college, I think I took 2 years of Spanish. Languages, I would say after English, it would be Arabic. The my most dominant two languages that I speak. Now, while in the community, I did learn Nubic, which is a language in which York created within the community. I did learn Nubic. All right.
Okay. The next question are your thoughts on the metanetter being deciphered.
That's off topic. That's off topic. I wanted to stick with that's off topic for tonight. So I want to stay on topic tonight with the show which Malik and myself brought up as far as York and his false claim of teaching the people Islam. And we had to bring this up because the Nuwabians run around saying that all those were schools. All those were schools. And from that school, we went on to another school and to another school. Now, I thought it was important, and Malik thought it was important because it's only within the school of Islam that York reached the heights that he does. York's community under Islam, his community does not grow as large as it does under Islam. And I thought it was important because York disrespects those who trusted in him in a video where York says, I had to take Islam in order to hide in it because I thought and felt that it was the most ridiculous thing and I can get away with anything and say anything and none of y'all would know. And I could just hide and protect us from what I actually have to teach, right? And so in that statement, York disrespects those who actually trusted in him prior to the school or the field which they say he wants to go into. And so, go ahead.
And say, when did you start to doubt York's teachings and why?
I would say when I got my hands on Bilal Phillips' book. Now, mind you, Bilal Phillips' book came out in the early 90s, 89, 90s, right? By the time I got my hands on it, this is mid to late 90s. And I had read York's rebuttal to the book. And it seemed nice. It seemed cute. It seems concise. Okay, all right, you know, and it continued to get me by as a follower of York. But when I finally got my hand on a copy of Bilal Phillips' book, and I began to read it and see some of the things in which was said in them, and actually begin to bring up some of the points that Bilal makes, and go back to some of York's older books and begin to compare and contrast, that's when I began to see some kinks in York. This rebuttal book that he put out is weak. It was weak. But yet I stayed with the community until I began to see and hear other characteristics of York and of other people who lived in the community that were very close to York. And then I began to see, okay, not only are some of the teachings false, they can't even get Islam right. We done moved on to Nubian Hebrews. They getting this wrong. And I'm beginning to seeing more and more devilishment, more and more disagreeable people. I'm beginning to hear more and more people talk about York, they themselves. And that's when I decided to just pull back from the community. That's when I pulled back from the community. Pulling back from the community, I was able to assess my thoughts, reevaluate things, and look at the community unbiased by myself. And at a certain point in time, I realized that I basically had wasted approximately 10 years of my life. Literally wasted practically 10 years of my life following this junk. Just junk. And so I have people come up to me that remember me, or even when I'm having a conversation with my wife, and she'll bring up something about a song in the 90s or a movie in the 90s. And I have to explain to people, I have no idea what you're talking about. I got about 10 years of my life where I wasted, where there was no music other than Thought Nubian, York's music, and there was no movies. You know, I literally have a gap that is just simply wasted. Now, Nubians are like to jump on that and see, well, he sounds bitter. No, I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter at all about the whole thing. It was a learning process, and I lived through it. But I wouldn't want that for anyone else. And that's why I make it my mission to come on with your help, undo the untruths that I help promote, teach, with your permission and providing me the platform. I'm able to get on this platform and to apologize to those whom I brought into the community, to those at the black colleges that I visited and tablighed, meaning preached to, called to join the community. Those people in college, those people whom I got to quit their jobs to join the community, those people who, when they joined the community, gave up everything to follow this fake imam, fake rabbi, fake pharaoh, this hustler, pimp, child molester, pedophile, you know, Dwight York. So I apologize from my heart to all of those, sincerely. All those that I brought into the community, you have my deepest regrets and apologies. And York, and a lot of people were just simply fascinated by the charisma of York and some of the things he used to teach, especially back in those days, because York could tell a lie and make it sound good. York could tell a lie and make it sound good, and that's one of the things that attracted a lot of people. A lot of people may not be familiar with some of York's older books, but York's older books have many quotations from scriptures such as the Quran or the Bible, or these scriptures York mentions as being the Suhuf, the Suhuf. Now, as Muslims and non-Muslims, many people are familiar with the Quran and the Bible, right? But you have what's also called the Suhuf. The Suhuf is mentioned in the Quran, but is simply mentioned by name. It is not a scripture which anyone within the Muslim community says that they are in possession of. Yet York claims to be in possession of it. And not only the Suhuf, but York goes on to fabricate and elaborate his descriptions of the Suhuf into actually 5 books, which York writes about. The Suhuf of Adam, Enoch, Idris, Abraham, and I believe I'm leaving one out. So when it comes to the false teachings of York and him never teaching the people proper Islam, that's one of them. As Muslims, we believe, we believe what's revealed in the book, right? As followers of the book, we believe what's in the book. But nowhere in the book does it mentions what York mentions, the Suhuf of Adam, Enoch, Seth, Abraham. Nowhere does it mention any of those things. So that's a false claim in which York makes concerning Islam, amongst many others. Now, when people go to York's books, they have to understand that York's books are nothing more than sophistry, right? Sophistry. Now, I'll spell this word out for those that may not be familiar with its meaning. Okay? Sophistry is spelled S-O-P-H. Here we go. I-S-T-R-Y. Sophistry. All right. Now, the meaning of sophistry is information which is disseminated, or given out, or told with malice purposes. They have bad intentions behind them. You can look this word up. It's an English word, not in common usage, but in academia, it is. Within historical academia, it is. And York's works, his books, all of his books, nothing more than sophistry. Nothing more than sophistry. Because behind all of York's books, York has one aim, and that's to please himself. That's York's complete purpose and aim in all of these books. So where York may make a statement, let me give you an example. But let me first say this, right? Within Islam, we do not have sophistry. We give you what we believe as the truth, wholesale. We don't give you a little bit, and when you get that, we're gonna give you the rest. I'm gonna give you what I really came to teach you, or teach you one thing and then flip it upside down. This is what it is. It is what it is. Simple as that. But York doesn't do that. In his old publications, what I'm reading from right here, I'm going to give you an example of York's sophistry. All right, this is taken from Tabernacle of the Most High on page 94. All right, here's one. Here's a good one. Yeah. All right. Reading from the book. York says, I have spoon-fed you all the knowledge. You maintain yourselves. You have to forgive me. York's, whoever's editing these books in punctuation was never great. So, I have spoon-fed you all the knowledge you maintain yourselves by today. I have been your father, brother, friend, teacher, and guide, and have sent you no harm in any way. Have I? Exclamation points. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now that's a very interesting sentence that York puts together. He states that he has sped from you all the knowledge you maintain yourselves by today, and I have been your father, brother, son, friend, teacher, guide, and guide, and have sent no harm to you in any way, have I? Now, when this book comes out, York is hiding the fact that he's molesting the young girls in the community. York is hiding behind that he's taking advantage of brothers and sisters. York is hiding behind the 1993 FBI investigation of welfare fraud in the community. York is hiding behind all of those things, right? In order to project himself, to make himself look like that he is this up and up guy, teacher, father figure, this, that, and the other. Yeah, he's a father, all right. He's a father of over 200 children, none of them given their respect and their right as a child. None of them, fully, with no disrespect to any of the offsprings of York, the children that York have had. None of them have been given their due respect, due right as a child, as York. And so York hides behind that claim right there, right? And then you have on page 65 also, York makes a claim about York makes a claim about how can you man, the writing is so bad. How can you have a York is how can you have a physical thing in your heart? Right. This is the chapter in which York talks about having denouncing other Muslims within the Northeast community when they do not agree with York's teaching about wearing white, looking a certain way, living in the community, blah 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 blah, or those Muslims who may not be practicing to the best of their ability or practicing how they like. And York is criticizing them about how can you have a physical thing in your heart, meaning belief. Yet York does the same thing on his exit from Islam, saying, meaning that Islam is in our heart. We have to leave. The Muslim world is getting too hostile. So we need to leave. So we're going to leave all the bad things and we're going to keep Islam, peace in our heart. Peace in our heart. Mind you, while all these things are going on, York is behind the scene, conducting himself completely contrary to what he prints and writes up. Prints and writes up. The only person York is literally trying to satisfy is himself throughout all of his writings and publications. It's all sophistry. York will put some truths. York will put some truths or truthful quotations from other books, writings, or individuals, but they're all for the purpose of himself. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's no problem. We had a question or three in the chat. They say, who is the current leader of the Nuwaubian nation, and is Prince York capable of leading a nation, in your opinion?
That's a good one. In this book right here, the Constitution of the Nuwaubians, right? And this is sort of off topic, but I'm gonna bring it back, right? I'll entertain this and bring it back. There is no current leader. There is no current leader of the Nuwaubian nation, subgroups. There is no unification of them. Now, in this book, York writes that after him there will be caliphs. After him there will be caliphs. Caliphs in the Arabic word for rulership or successor, one that comes after him. Right? York writes that in there. Currently, there is no bona fide, I'm the man of this whole thing in the Nuwaubian community, whether it's Nuwaubians with a P, Nuwaubians with a B, whether we're talking about proto-Nuwaubians, crypto-Nuwaubians, neuter Nuwaubians, uh, these are all prefixes or subgroups of Nuwabians that I create in order to keep them distinct. Because currently the Nuwabian organization are, to my count, in about 13 separate groups. None of them agreeing with one another. Tribal wars. Prince York, no. Do I think he'd be able to head this and actually bring this thing back around? No, I don't. No, I don't. My personal feelings that I don't. Do I think that they will ever go away? No, they won't. No, they won't. But York started off as a pariah within the Black urban community, even within the Muslim community, right? He was a pariah, and hopefully he'll stay that way, and no one will have to worry about him. Next question.
Okay, the next question was, the holy tablets at one point were being sold for over $1,000. Now the lowest price is around 250. Is it worth that price in your opinion, and do you have a copy?
Where you get these questions from? All right, I'll entertain them. Yes, I have copies of the holy tablets. I have 2 or 3 copies. I actually collect them. I collect them in order to take them out of circulation. Now, at the same time that I do that, that also drives up the market value. So if there is someone who is interested in gaining York's books for the sake of historical record, or combating some of the foolishness and pseudoscience and cultural vultures that are Nuwabians, that's up to you. That's the decision in which you have to make. Like I say, I'm doing my part, and unfortunately, I'm driving up the market value on them. But they are becoming, they are less expensive than they were at one point in time. The books themselves aren't worth anything at all, other than, you know, maybe starting a barbecue. The books themselves aren't worth anything. Straight trash, hot garbage. But by reading them, you know, you'll gain some insight and maybe save someone from joining a cult. Because I have to say, York is probably one of the most sophisticated cult organizations, sophisticated and complex organizations that I have come across and read about. Now, York isn't the first one to use Islam and create a cult. As a matter of fact, there's a white woman in the late 80s who used Islam and went on a killing spree. She took and created a cult, and her and her husband went on a killing spree. I'll provide the actual info on her name, and you can look it up. So there's nothing really unique to York and his publications, other than the complexity that he went to in order to keep himself relevant, keep the people busy, to get rich, to constantly start, you know, Nuwabians talk about unity and this and that, but York loved to be in the middle of fitna. I'm sorry. York loved to be in the middle of, trying to think of a way to translate fitna, confusion. He loved to be, you know, he loved to be in the middle of confusion, and York was very messy all the time. Messy. York was messy in Islam. He was messy as Nubian Hebrews. He was messy as Nubian Hebrews. He was messy as Nubian Moors. He was messy even in his own trial. So I can go through each examples through each one. Tonight's topic is about how messy York. We ought to call him Messy York. Messy Dwight. Instead of Messy Maya, you can call him Messy Dwight. But this book right here that I brought up, where it talks about the Constitution of the United Nubian Nation of Moors. York was messy in this too, right? Because at one point in time, York tried to claim, acquiesce, basically Debo, another Moorish group based in Louisiana, by the Empress. I can't pronounce her name, but it's Versatize, I believe. I know I'm mispronouncing the name, so forgive me. But basically, they're a group down. They're a sovereign Moor group down in Louisiana. So York tries to acquiesce, basically Debo the group, right? And try to link up with them. But the Empress, the woman who was actually the head of it, the Empress wasn't having it. Wasn't having it. And after a brief courtship between them, they cut it off. But during that courtship, York went out and began to print publications using the other organizations' indigenous status file docket. I mean, bef before the wedding was over with between them two groups, they had a divorce, but that didn't stop York. He quickly went into hustle mode, getting books out, writing, talking about how his community, how his lineage and his history of his people go all the way back to Louisiana, goes all the way back to the Empress and yada yada yada. But once the Empress cut ties, York then had to cut all that doctrine off, change the name of the group, and then in 1998 file paperwork, a docket, which is basically a docket. There is no actual recognition of indigenous status, but just simply some paperwork, which it was filed in 1998. And so now York has the other group's docket, file docket on his paperwork, and now he has to add the 1998 docket information onto there. And so York is just messy all the way around, even up to his court date. York doesn't know whether or not he wants to be from here or from someplace else. York doesn't know whether or not he wants to. But Chuck covered all that. I won't get into the trial. I promise I won't get into the trial tonight.
Okay. They say, is Nubic just Arabic with the vowels changed?
Yes, Nubic is nothing more than chopped and screwed Arabic. That's all it is. Chopped and screwed. So you take Arabic and actually Nubic uses Arabic vowels in conjugation. So basically what happened, this is after Sheikh Dawood dies, and the community now, York is now going into its own now. It's really leaving normative Islam or Orthodox Islam. York is pushing Arabic and for the people to speak Arabic. And he brings in some Arabic teachers, but eventually all that stops. And so now the young children are beginning to chop and screw the Arabic language so that they may understand one another, in order to fill the gaps in the lessons in which they don't have, such things as how do you make a word plural, or show possession, or feminine and masculine. So the children begin to speak this sort of Spanglish, French, Arabic amongst themselves, and York picks it up. But the actual language Nubic is nothing more than Arabic with new fonts, with different fonts, with Arabic vowels. Some of the points in York's doctrine that he begins to teach concerning the definite articles in Arabic, al and el, and how they're conjugated in Arabic with the preceding noun. I won't get into it too deeply, but you would not say al-Rahman, you would say Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, uh, Ash-Shaitan, or Ashhadu la, such words like that. Even though the definite article uh, changes in its pronunciation. Well, York stuck to it, and sticking to the al and l definite article, York put that in Nubic. So within Nubic, you'll see some slight variances uh, in some of the grammatical rules, but it's nothing more than Arabic. Really though, it's nothing more than chopped and screwed Arabic. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, those people who were in the community before this Nubic came out that learned Arabic or was exposed to the Arabic, we didn't go to no Nubic classes. We didn't learn Nubic, not at all, because we looked at it and was like, "Pfft, man, I'm not finna waste my time with this class. It's a waste of time. Don't nobody speak but the kids. The only ones, learning it is the new people coming in. And man, I got this quota. These quotas keep coming up, keep going up. Man, I got to get out here and get this money. I am not finna waste my time with this Nubic. Quota done went from $50 to $75. I'm trying to see my mate. I ain't even seen my kids. Man, I need some deodorant. I'm out here in the streets, and I ain't got time for them Nubic classes. And that's really how we felt about it. We didn't care nothing about it. And then
I can
Nubic,
understand that.
huh?
I said I can understand that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how, not just me, but just that's how many of us felt. It was a waste of time. It was a waste of time. And that's when you had a lot of the old soldiers in the community begin to fall off. And this is also during the decline. This is part of the decline of York community. I'll show you an example of Nubic. Right. So on this page, if I can get it good, right? And this page is Arabic, right? Right? El Injil, right? This is what it says in here, El Injil. Now, and over here, this is a revised edition of this book, right? This is a revised edition. Well, you can see where Nubic begins to come in, and when this book is actually published, this book comes in a little bit later. I'm sorry if y'all can't see it, but this photo right here originally had around written in it in an Arabic motif around it. In this book, it is written in Nubic. This is definitely Nubic. I don't know if you guys can see that well enough. Whoops. Right? That is Nubic. That is Nubic. The script is very angular, right? Very angular. And in this particular script right here, York has the vowels put in place. Okay? Those are the small lines that you see above the letters and below the letters themselves. York has, yes?
I didn't say anything.
No,
Oh,
I don't mean. I mean, I know I'm cutting your wisdom, but there's something very important because you're bringing up the vowels
yeah.
that Dr. Pork would always love to use. One of the things that Dr. Pork would like to say is, for example, when you look at that Nubic writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have any understanding somewhat of Arabic, for example, looking at that, you can see that Allah is being spelled in that Nubic writing. You
Right.
see the Alif, you see Alif is A, you see the Lam, which is L,
Mm-hmm.
you Lam, L, Alif,
Yeah.
A, Ha, H. You see it, right? Now you
Yeah.
see like these things they're called like dhammas, right? They're the vowel sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Pork, one of his weak arguments that he would use in saying that the Quran is not an authentic book, it's like this. If you're going to say that the Quran is not an authentic book, at least have a very good argument. All right. Now, his argument in the language itself, because the language itself in the Quran in the Muslim world is the thing that the Muslim views the Quran as a miracle within itself because of the self-preservation of the Fusha Arabic, the classical Arabic that has not changed. Meaning that if you went to any Muslim on the 7 continents of this planet, every Muslim is going to recite the same Quran. If you went to every Christian on the planet, or anybody who reads the Bible, everybody who reads the Bible is not going to recite the same Bible. For example, if you have a King James Bible and you read John chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. If you read a Jehovah's Witness New World Translation Bible, John chapter 1, verse 1 is altered and changed by one letter, and it's the letter A, because it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. Now, what Dr. Bork is saying about the vowels, he's saying that there was no vowels in the Fusha Arabia, in the Fusha Arabic, in the Quranic Arabic. Now, for somebody who supposedly is the descendant of the Mahdi, is from the Sudan, and Sudanese people to this day, they speak very, very, very well Arabic. One of the best people you can learn Arabic from is a Sudanese person. They have very impeccable Arabic, Quranic Arabic. The vowels are in place of the letters because a person that does not speak Arabic indigenously needs the vowels. You need to know what letter to stress, how it would be pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody that is speaking Arabic indigenously does not need the vowels. Mm-hmm. Here's my proof in the pudding. If you go and if you look at the word Lehigh, like in Pennsylvania, there's the Lehigh Valley. When you look at that word, it's not spelled Leehigh. It's spelled Leigh. But because you have an understanding of how English operates, and you understand I before E, and in certain situations with words, E is before I, because you have that knowledge of the English language, you understand that that word is Lehigh. To someone that's not speaking English as an indigenous language, they're not going to know that. They're going to be confused as to why it's spelled that way when it's not pronounced that, or why is it pronounced that way when it's not spelled that way.
Yeah.
So that is an argument that he would use, which is a very weak argument. And so if you're somebody that's never studied Arabic and you come across his writings and you're like, wow, I have seen a Quran, and there are Qurans in which you don't see vowels. Now, if you're somebody that has studied Arabic very well, and you have excelled in the language, and you're not somebody that indigenously does not speak Arabic, then of course you don't need to read Arabic with vowels. But right. On the other hand, you will.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And it's a weak argument because you can go to the Arabic-speaking worlds and just buy a newspaper, or just look at a billboard. They don't use vowels in the posters or in the newspaper. They don't use them. If you speak Arabic, you don't need the vowels. And the only reason why the vowels were set in place or even used, right, is for non-speakers. That's simply it. Now, York speaks about how it didn't, Arabic Fusha did not have vowels in it. Now, this too is a fallacy. Excuse me. This too is a fallacy. Anyone can go search up, and I call out Nuwabians or anyone, right? There is no such thing as a vowel-less language. There is no such thing. There is no such thing as a vowel-less languages. All languages have vowels in them. Right. Now, whether or not they are phonetically written out in the script is one thing, but the language itself has vowels in it. And that even comes up in our times, our contemporary times nowadays, just like the previous question that someone wanted to ask, do I believe that the meta netter has been translated? Well, that question in itself is based upon the meta netter does not have vowels in it. It does not have vowels. So how to actually pronounce it from its writing is difficult, right? The actual pronunciation. But from what is written, a general, and some will say a thorough understanding of what is being conveyed can be understood, right? And it's the same thing with Arabic or the Quran. The only difference between the Quran Arabic and the metanetter, right, is that the metanetter, right, has a broken chain of transmission. What it actually means spiritually or literally, the chain has been broken. The priesthood has has a broken chain and link in it. Whereas in the Quran, right, the chain of transmission down, 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 down from one to the other has remained intact. So what the phonetics of the Quran and how to pronounce it is known, is readily known. York just simply used that as a scheme to sell his own Quran, to sell more books, and to keep people busy. Go ahead, Malik. Go ahead. Oh, okay. I guess he muted his mic.
No, yeah.
Uh-huh.
The thing that cause see, somebody had asked in the room earlier about what's this whole thing about risk, like is risk mentioned in the Quran, and see the thing is, I'm like I said, my Arabic is very rusty, and I'm not even gonna play myself. Uh, if I speak Arabic, I sound like a 4-year-old, like reading it, like I'm real slow with it, but I'm not fluent, and I would have to go to tafsir. I would have to go to the meaning of these verses. And so I'm saying that to say that, for example, two things I want to mention is this. Tafsir. What is tafsir?
Mm-hmm.
Tafsir is the meaning to the verses of the Quran. Just like there's tafsir to the hadiths.
Mm-hmm.
You look at somebody like Dr. Port. He's rejected the hadiths. So by rejecting the hadiths, him claiming that the Quran was the word of God, by rejecting the Sunnah, he has rejected the speech of Allah. And by rejecting the speech of Allah, you rejected the Sunnah. Now, what is the proof in that? There are many verses in the Quran that says, obey Allah and his messenger. Well, how do you obey Allah?
I'll quote
The
them for you,
Quran.
Malik, if you want. Go ahead.
How do you obey his messenger?
Yeah.
The Sunnah. Because the Sunnah is the application of the Quran. Now, there's another verse that says, obey Allah and his messenger and those in authority above you. Who is those in authority? That's talking about the ulama. That's talking about the scholars of the past and present. Well, why would as a rhetorical question, why would the ulama be of importance in knowing anything about the Quran and knowing anything about the Hadith? Because one, the Sahaba themselves, the companions of the Prophet, were Hafiz, meaning they memorized the Quran like Muhammad. That's first of all. They themselves were scholars of the Quran. And there are those certain Sahabas, like Imam Malik, Imam Hanif, who were actual Sahabas and companions of the Prophet. And Imam Malik, Imam Hanif, Imam Shafi, Imam Hanbali is known as the four Imams, and they are known as madhabs. They are known as the four schools of thought. When what they did was They explained the hadiths, they explained how things were done. And there were times that the Prophet may have done things differently. And it doesn't mean that it was wrong. It just means that that was how he did it. Everybody has a way in which they may do things differently, you know, and it doesn't mean that it's right. I mean, it doesn't mean it's wrong that you do this. So by him rejecting these hadiths, the question now is, on whose authority are you getting your understanding of the Quran from? Meaning, how are you understanding the ayats and the verses of the Quran? Because as Brother Farooq pointed out, and this is an actual fact, people that I know, when Sheikh Dawood died, I was like 2 years old. Okay, so I know people, I'm sure that the brother knows as well, people that were around then. And so when he died, he made this transition, he began to change and do what he did. Now, who did he get his understanding from? Because if, for example, you read the Quran and it starts out, it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What does that mean? In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. What does Rahman and what does Rahim mean? It's an attribute of Allah. Those are the first two attributes out of the 99 attributes mentioned. But what does that mean? Unless you have the tafsir and the fiqh and the understanding of the scholars who had the understanding of the companions of the Prophet. Rahman means beneficent. It's a beneficent that is only bestowed upon the Muslims. But Rahim, mercy, is something that is bestowed upon not just the Muslims, but the non-Muslim. Because Islamically, Allah will bestow his mercy upon everybody and all creation, animals, humans, jinn. So, you know, as he mentioned also, when you read in the Quran called Surat Nisa, the chapter of the woman, and it explains who the man can marry. There's rules to this. There's rules to how a woman is treated. The Quran says that Jannah, paradise, is at the footstep or is at the foot of the mother. It was even asked to the Prophet in a hadith, in a Sahih hadith. They said, "Oh Rasulullah, who do you obey?" You know, in regards to who is obey, it's Allah. But he then said, "Your mother." And he didn't just say your mother once, but he said mother 3 times. And then says, "Your father." Now, when you look at Dr. Pork, which the brother brought to light, which this is a known fact about how brothers had to go out and sell $50, $100 of oils and incense, make a quota just to have sex with your wife. That brothers lived in one quarter and the sisters lived in another building with the children and the women. That is not Islam. And so because he rejected and neglected and deceived the people and not to accept the hadiths alone goes into further explanation. First of all, if you're married to a woman in this land, that is incumbent upon you to lay in the bed with your woman. You are to be near your woman and your child, not be separate. So his and again, as Farooq said, the behavior, the character, his in Arabic, the word for character is adab. The adab of Dr. Pork was totally anti-Islam. If the Quran says that Muhammad is the best of examples onto humanity, well, how the hell do you follow the example of the man if the hadiths is what explains who he is and what he did? Pardon stuff. I'll be right back.
Yeah, not a problem. No problem.
Okay, let me check and see if there's any questions. I don't think so,
All right.
but I'm gonna make sure. Nope, no new questions.
All right. So if I can just real briefly,
Hmm.
look, getting a little late for me, but real briefly, if I can just coattail a couple things. There are numerous verses in the Quran that speaks about uh, following the oral tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, following those who are of knowledge after him, and that there's verses in the Quran that speaks about the Prophet was giving the book and the wisdom within it. Two things: the book and the wisdom, kitab wal hikmah. Right. So the argument or the precedent within Orthodox Islam or normative Islam about concerning the oral history is written within the script itself. There is no debate within normative Islam whether they're Shia, Sunni, Deobandi, whomever, right? Within Islam concerning the oral history uh, and Islam, and basically York put that aside in order to make his own rules, to make his own theology, to make to make everything to begin to center around him. And that's really how the Ansar Allah community developed and grew. Because here's this Negro out of Boston, Massachusetts. He's the only Muslim saying these things that he's saying. This man saying if you don't move in, you're going to hell. If you wearing a suit, tie, you dressing like a Westerner, you going to hell. I got the names of everybody who going up 144,000. I got the names of everybody, and everybody better fit in their seats when the spaceships come. So this kind of stuff, a lot of people were gravitating towards and became very popular. And you got to also understand that York's height of his community also came about during the rap music. So York would a lot of times would like to co-op uh, rappers or whomever he thought was influential and maybe that could possibly bring more people in. So you got a lot of rappers who were affiliated or just simply got co-opted into it, the whole Ansar Allah community. And uh, I know Jay-Z did an interview talking about how he had to help Jazz out when he got caught up in the cult. And Jazz had been in the cult for quite some times, believing in a lot of this foolishness. Uh, and then you have some people who came in and, could see off rip that this was foolishness. Could see off rip that this was foolishness. One of the foolish things that York says, there's so many books laid out over here that is completely false within Islam. This is oh uh yeah. Hmm. Yeah, one of the things that York talks about concerning Islam is the face veil. Now, the men in Islam, the men in the Ansar Allah community, you know them when you saw them because we had on the all white with the turbans. And if you knew us well enough, you might see one of the sisters every now and then. And the sister's dress consisted of a long dress, right? Abaya, with a kimar and face veil. Now, York mandated this dress for the women, as well as the men too. But we're going to talk specifically about the women, right? This face veil that York mandates the women to wear or go to hell. Nowhere where you won't find that it is a mandate for women to wear that. As a matter of fact, when Muslims go to Hajj, right, the women are not allowed to wear face veils. They wear just a regular head covering, and that's it. And so this is on the sacred Hajj. Likewise, and just in the everyday going about, it is not necessary, and nowhere will you find in the Muslims scripture that the face veil is a mandate, as well as the male's clothes. York had everyone dressed in white, and that this is the color of the righteous and the paradise, and a lot of excuse me, and a lot of nuts followed that. I was a nut at one time too, believing and following York into that, and how the white was the color of the Prophet Muhammad, right? When in fact, within the oral tradition, we find that the Prophet Muhammad's favorite color was actually green, and that he wore several colors. But on a lot of occasions, he did wear white, but not exclusively white. So by separating actual Islam as it has been practiced for 1400 years, York was able to use the name Islam for his own purpose. In other words, Islam. Wasn't Islam, it was Islam, and it was definitely York's Islam that many people fell for. And hopefully they woke up at some point in time and didn't die within York's community, like some people that I do know that did pass away in it. Now, as far as York's community, and here we go. York's community, the Ansar Allah community, and after Sheikh Dawood dies, York begins a courtship with a lot of other communities in order to bring them in. York begins this courtship with the Nation of Islam, where now the Nation of Islam are uniform as Ansars begins to mimic the Nation of Islam and the fruit of Islam. Now we have a uniform along with the Jalabiyah that also looks like the Nation of Islam. And York then also prints out the 5% of lessons books. York is going into the Injil and the Gospel of David and reprinting scriptures and books and scriptures, trying to court other people to be a part of his group, to be a part of his community, and really to bring in more revenue. That's really about it. The only person who will really matter to York in the Ansar Allah community and all those other communities thereafter, by whatever name you want to call them, was York. York was the only person that actually mattered, and the proof of this is that York even went so far to went so far as to disrespect and violate his best friend by molesting his daughter. York really didn't give a damn about no one. No Islam, Metaneter, Mesopotamia, Sumar, Upper or Lower Egypt, Blue Nile, White Nile. York didn't give a damn. As long as you turn in that money, baby, that's all that really mattered. You have any questions come through?
Let me recheck. But I don't see any new ones.
All right. Everybody from fell asleep or then turned off?
Nah, ain't nobody fell asleep. It's still 26 watching. It was like 32, but it keep bouncing back and forth.
All right. I appreciate it. I appreciated people tuning in and watching.
No problem, but you are very thorough. You don't give people many questions to ask.
I will. I don't think I went into this. One of the things that makes York different from normative Islam or Orthodox Islam is that within normative Islam, our teachers, scholars, wherever we learn knowledge from, it is written down in the record. So if I go to a classroom and this is my teacher within Islamic sciences, right, I'll get what is a certificate, which we call in Arabic ijaza. And on this certificate, I have been authorized to teach such and such subject by such and such person, right? And then now my name goes into the link of teachers of such knowledge of such science. This is what's called the ijaza and isnad. York doesn't have any of those credentials. York doesn't have any of those. So whether York is making up his own rules about how to dress, how to eat, how to sleep, how to have sex with your wife, right? That was a big book in the Ansar community, Sex Life of a Muslim. Way off, way off. York had stuff in there that was completely forbidden in Islam, such as anal sex, York would take a verse, go into your mates as you pleased, and he would say, hey, do the damn thing however you like. Just go ahead. But he would cut off what the prophet actually said, elaborating on that, so that when people had questions, does it literally mean go into them as you please? Probably went ahead and elaborated, and that's recorded within the oral history. So in this oral history, when I mentioned ijaza and isnad, within the oral history, hadith, right? It too is a science, because now you have people who have the oral history, and they pass the oral history from word to mouth, from one to teacher to student, one to the other. And when a person becomes high in knowledge in the oral history, they're called a muhaddith. Hold on a second. Muhaddithun, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a person that's has memorized and studied, or has learned many of the oral traditions. And so that's just one example where York has just went his own way concerning Islam,
Oh,
and also the spiritual aspect as well. York, this is another thing that attracted a lot of people to the Ansar law community. This is one of his books. This is I'll call this a middle. This is a middle publication, the Sufi path, or the esoteric teachings within Islam, the spiritual teachings within Islam, right? Even within this, right, you must have a teacher that teaches you the tradition, that teaches you in order so that you can teach others, right? There's rules to the whole thing. York has none of that. York creates his own pure Sufi sons and daughters of the green light, pure Sufi order, and he has no ijaza, no isnad going back to anyone. York's teachings go back to his dinner table. That's basically it. That's basically where York's teachings go back to, his dinner table. He'll sit there, think of something, sit there, watch, reading an X-Men comic book or something, and he'll say, you know what, I like that. I like that. We're gonna write that. We're gonna do that. And that's basically what he done. But unfortunately, because of the lack of knowledge, accessible knowledge, back then, many people, many sincere people were fooled. I don't think everyone was gullible or crook that joined. I think a lot of people were sincere and then just simply were fooled. You know?
mm. Well, you have one more question. It says, can you talk on the pictures of prophets in York's books?
Yeah, yeah. See if I can find a good one. Find a page. They're everywhere in here. Oh, here's a picture right here. This is not one of the prophet, but I wanted to bring this up real quickly. There's a lot of material that I actually have to go over, right? I'm sorry. This is a picture of York and his mother right here, Fatima. The crackhead on the left, that's York, right? And the woman, that's his mother. right? And what's interesting about it is that number one, his mother is wearing a nose ring, which is something that men wore in the Ansar Allah community, but within Islamic cultures, only women wear that, not men. The second thing is that she and he, the crackhead on the left, meaning York, are both dressed in culturally Islamic attire, right? And like I said earlier, York really don't give a damn about his mom. He will throw her under the bus along with his brother Oba and the rest of his people, right? The one interesting thing about that picture, and I bring it up for a reason, is that early 2000, York mother passed away. And on her tombstone, she has written, it is written, I won't say she has written, it is written in Arabic, the Islamic Declaration of Faith. All right? It is written on her tombstone in Arabic, the Islamic Declaration of Faith. And that says a lot. That says a lot about his mom. And no matter how close York tries to make it seem like his mom was to the community and his family were, followers of his, in her dying moments on her tombstone, they placed that. And that sort of Arabic motif inscription on that tombstone, a lot of times is what Muslims use in order to identify that this person was a Muslim. This person who lived was a Muslim and died was a Muslim. That's I wanted to get to that while I was browsing through here. But as far as the pictures, I'll give a little bit. This right here is a book. This right here is a book in which I'll be going through 360 questions to ask Orthodox Muslims. This is a publication that York produced after Bilal Phillips' book dropped on him, right? So I'll be going through this, answering these questions to the best of my ability, one by one. All right. So this is a picture of, this is a depiction, this is York's depiction of the Prophet Muhammad. Okay. All right. A couple things you'll notice on this picture, if you ever do see one, all right? He has tribal marks on his face, 3 slashes on his cheek, which York would do to himself, which York used to color in on his face as well, imitating tribal marks. Anyone grab a modern picture, a recent picture of York before he went to jail, and you'll see them tribal marks are gone. Any idiot would tell you that tribal marks do not go away. Once you get scarred in the face, you're scarred in the face for life. So that's the picture of the Prophet Muhammad. I'm gonna put this all together. All right. This is a picture of, this is a depiction by York of Joshua. And York has these pictures in pretty much a bunch of his books. And these, yeah.
It's funny. You mentioned about the body markings, right? Princess Pork. His new claim is that his father has tribal marks all on his chest.
Yeah.
And that his father went through many different rites of passages in Africa. Like, it's like some crazy number that he went through.
Yeah. I've heard that. I've heard that. All they have to do is grab York's fake Liberian passport picture and try to, when they find those tribal marks in his face, just give me a call. Just give me a call. They're not there. They're not there. But a lot of the depictions that York uses in the books of the prophets and whatnot, the various prophets or whatever he wants to claim, they were black or Nubian in various degrees. And many of them were written by a sister by the name of Nikki Lopez, a very good artist. A lot of people fell in love with her drawing. A lot of people probably joined the community because of her drawing.
Compared to pictures look like York.
Huh?
All those pictures look like York.
Yeah, to a degree, yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. York.
They look like what he would want himself to look if he could have picked his own persona.
Yeah. Well, York intentionally made, let's say, within Islam, Muslims recognize that the Prophet Muhammad. So York would intentionally place a likeness of the depiction of Muhammad and himself, or York would intentionally create a depiction of the Mahdi of the Sudan to look like himself. Likewise, when York moves on into Mesopotamian culture, or when York moves on into Egyptian culture, York has to be the man. He has to be the center of attention all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of
And
times, the only times that you'll see pictures of white people or non-Nubians at York call them is people who are of establishment, or who are known, bad guys or whatnot, right? But many of these pictures that York has in these books, they're actually from your application when you moved in the community. And like I said earlier, you fill out this application, drug screen, uh, uh, is your blood clean? Do you own any debts? Blah blah blah, and you send in the picture. And that picture was used. Number one, first, your picture was solicited by York. He would go through the pictures, and if he saw a sister that he liked, he already had all the information on her, and she would get summoned and probably be the next wife. But the pictures were also used for these pictures. The photographs were also used for these depictions that York put in his books. And a lot of times they were more captivating than the actual doctrine. And shouts out to Nikki Lopez for her artwork. She never got paid a dime, but I give her much props. She did a damn good job. As a matter of fact, York got rich just off the posters themselves. Just off the posters themselves. The Black Jesus, the Lamb, and all that other stuff. So that's a little bit of info on the pictures themselves. The
okay,
pictures were of us. and in York's holy tablets, you'll find pictures of Spike Lee. You'll find pictures of yeah, because he made Spike Lee look like an elf. You'll find pictures of Quincy Jones. You'll find pictures of you know
oh Lord,
lots of different. It's complex and a complete waste of time.
Wait. You forgot
Yeah,
how he said about Sherman Helmsley and Anwar Sadat.
yeah, they're twins. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Boy, York was messy. Before there was Messy Maya, there was York. I'm telling you. So yeah, that
somebody
whole thing,
said they thought it
huh?
was forbidden. Somebody said they thought it was forbidden to draw a depiction of Muhammad.
Uh, within Islam, uh, paintings are permissible, right?
Mm.
There's certain depictions which are frowned upon, right? And they have various degrees. They have uh, uh, various degrees of opinion on, right? Within Islam, some Muslims would say that drawing pictures is makruh, highly offensive, makruh. Others would say that it is haram under certain circumstances, right? Of certain individuals. Don't do these, right? Don't do these. You can do those, but don't do these. So there's differences of opinion in there concerning pictures, right? You'll have places like Saudi Arabia, which is considered an ultra orthodox, uh, ultra conservative Islamic country. Uh, they don't have depictions of the prophets, yet they do have depictions of the previous presidents of the country. Now, they're of the opinion that drawings and depictions are permissible under certain conditions, and the prophets, we just leave those alone, right? But it's not something that is commonly done within Muslim world. These depictions. prophets or such and such.
Okay. Somebody said, is it true that Tamaray is being rebuilt?
Hmm. Yeah, you have to ask the Nuwabi in that. I've heard that, but I've heard it for quite a while. They can try if they like, but I guess really you have to ask, what do you mean by Tamaray? Do you mean Tamaray down in Georgia, or do you mean a new Tamaray, a new Zion in some other location? The details of it, I have no info on. I couldn't tell you, but
Okay.
I can tell you it's a waste of time.
And somebody says, do you feel that Dr. York's prosecution should have been at the hands of a racist America?
I think York should have had enough sense to not violate his own community, where he would put himself in the hands of a racist America, if that is what he believes. You know, he was so smart, he was dumb. That's basically what I'm saying. And if you're innocent, you don't plead to child molestation, no matter what. Men don't take those charges.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And if you got 76 trillion years of information and knowledge, you would have known not to do all the moves that you made.
exactly,
He wouldn't
exactly.
have been racist.
Yeah. See, Dwight York was so smart, he was dumb. He had, he would have people read books and boost his ego, but the man was so dumb and egotistical that it's a shame. It's definitely a shame. And anyone that wants to debate me on that can. The man who claimed could debate anybody but couldn't take the stand in his own defense, like you guys say, 760 trillion million years of knowledge, but couldn't tell the future, couldn't tell, the only man in the heavens and the earth that can bring this message. Come on, man. And you think the aliens or the extraterrestrials or the higher beings were silly enough to choose a man like York to deliver a job? And this too reminds me of a verse in the Quran, where the verse in the Quran that states, uh, the verses and I'm paraphrasing now. Uh, there are verses in the Quran which are decisive, qati, and there are other verses in the Quran which are ambiguous, mutashabihat, right? Ambiguous. But those who have a disease in their heart, they cling to the indecisive or the ambiguous verses in order to lead people astray. I'm paraphrasing it. Okay, but that is the meaning of it. And York is the fulfillment of that verse, because he clung to the indecisive verses, such as, uh,
The first chapter of Bakra.
huh?
I mean, the first verse of Bakra.
Surah Baqarah.
Alif Lam Ra. No one knows the meanings of this but Allah.
Yeah. Right, right. Such as those. Yeah, thank you. Right. Such as the beginnings of certain surahs that begin with letters Alif Lam Mim, Ha Ra Ta. Yeah, yeah. York claimed to know the meanings of these things, but nowhere in 1400 years of uh, Muslim history have Muslims professed to know the meanings of it. Now there may have been Muslims who said they have some insight, or this is what they believe it means, but no one has ever gone on the scale and on the record to say, I definitively know what they mean because it was revealed to me what it means. Then Dr. York, then Dwight York. I got to stop saying doctor. Other than,
Another thing too is for those that's not familiar, there was an Egyptian doctor named Rashid Khalifa.
yep,
And the verse that Farooq mentioned, basically saying like some of these verses are literal, some of these verses are allegorical, right? And so Rashid Khalifa came up with this thing, the number 19.
yep. Which
By
York
add,
story? Mhm.
letters or verses, and it keeps coming out to 19, you know. And so Dr. Pork gravitated towards that 19. As a matter of fact, in the Nation of Islam, you'll see articles written by Tanetta Muhammad, who was one
Yeah.
of the wives of Elijah Muhammad, and it's
Mhm.
called Unveiling the Number 19, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And this thing about numbers, numerology,
Mhm.
um, it numerology is not something that is Islamic. You know, it's like if there's something dealing with a number, it's just a number. There's nothing, there's nothing esoteric about it. You know, like you won't read. In other words, if somebody's coming up with this number 19 theory or hypothesis, why is it that it's not spoken of in the Quran? Why is it not spoken of in the Hadiths? It's like saying on the first day of Christmas, that song, My True Love Gave to Me. I mean, I mean, personally, that's how I look at it. It's like, it's just like, it has no bearing. If, if, if the, now, and for those that don't know, right, I want people to understand something. And Farooq and I talk, and, you know, and I'm thankful that me and him can build, and there's no animosity towards each other. I used to be Muslim. However, because there's a thing called principle, the fact that something is just not true what somebody's talking about, the principle of something has to be defended. I don't care if it's the Quran. I don't care if it's um, the I Ching. You know, I don't care what it is. If
Mhm.
it's not true, it's not true. And so the charlatanism has to stop. You know, because a lot of stuff that we see in this conscious community is a result of the things that Dr. Pork taught. There's a lot of things that Phil Valentine teaches and Bobby Hemmett, these weirdos, Delbert Blair. You know, they just come out and they start talking about the most bizarre shit.
Nature boy.
And that it's like, first of all, there's no evidence for what you're talking about. Two, there's no benefit in it. Like, I'll give you an example. Sheikh Khalifa, Dr. Pork, the Nation of Islam, they get into in Nation of Gaza Earth, even the more science symbol, they get into numbers. Numbers, 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 numbers. But when you read the Quran for what it's saying, it says that Allah created man to worship him. That's it. So the concern for the Muslim is to make the salat, first of all, to understand Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, to make the salat, to do the salat correctly, to make their Hajj if they're able, to give charity if they're able, and to fast if they're able. All this additional stuff that people come up with is a distraction. And it really adds on to a bad image of the religion. The religion faces enough today about terrorism, fanatical people, um, you know, this just that alone. But then to have people come along and they start teaching crazy stuff, and so you may have somebody that is genuinely interested in it, and
Mhm.
they may get turned off by something somebody's teaching, and that's just not, you know, that's not the reality to what the religion teaches. So, you know, when I took my shahada, I was told that if I want to go to heaven or to paradise, to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, meaning to follow the criteria. If I want to go to hell, follow an ignorant Muslim. Because a Muslim and Islam are two different things. People are going to believe what they want to believe, but the religion will teach something else. Like, Islam doesn't teach suicide. that's actually a sin in the religion, and the sin is actually an unforgivable sin that even a Muslim makes. That the religion teaches that not only will they be punished in their grave, but when they are resurrected and judged and sent to hell, that they will repeat the suicide for eternity on top of being punished. There is no excuse at all for suicide. You're not even, and again, this all this is dealing, the hadiths explain this.
Yeah.
The Quran says that if one person is killed, it's as if all of humanity has been killed.
Yeah.
You know, there's understanding to when things are done. Like it was at the tip of my tongue. I don't know. I forgot what I was about to say. But yeah, so there's just, you know, with, like, for example, he mentioned before about you have to wear, Dr. Pork said you got to wear a white thobe. All right. Now you read the Quran. The Quran's not going to explain that to you. You have to have the hadiths. So then when you read the hadiths under what a man is supposed to dress like, it never says that you have to wear a thobe. It speaks about not wearing tight clothes. You can't expose your chest. You can't expose your arms. You know, you're to dress modest. You can't stink. Your clothes can't be dirty. You know, you're to take care of your clothes. You're to smell good. Your genitals cannot be exposed, what they call the awry.
Mm-hmm.
But never does it say you have to wear a white outfit. And that's facts that green was the color that Muhammad liked. He liked green.
Yeah. Now
And so,
I'm sorry, Malik. If we bring it back to York for a second, right? One of the things that York violates, which is widely known within Islam, and like Malik said, if you're gonna tell people about Islam, tell it. At least, you know, tell the whole thing. If you're gonna tell people about Christianity or ancient civilizations in Africa, just tell the whole thing and be truthful. That's the only thing that I'm really saying or fussing about. One of the things which is widely known within Islam is that it is prohibited. You cannot claim another man as your father. You cannot cut off your family tie and claim another man as your father, or insinuate or accuse another man or woman of fornication, which all of which York did. York's natural biological father is from the States, but York distanced himself, disavowed him, and claimed that the Mahdi, Ahmed Rahman al-Mahdi was his father. That right there is a violation in Islam. You can't do that. You can't do that. And then tell a lie on your mother, saying that after 2 months of having your older brother, she got to Egypt, had sex with a stranger, got knocked up, got pregnant, you was a preemie, and then here you come, the son of a president, and then now she comes back home with a baby to the rest of the children and their biological father, but you got a different biological father. That whole narrative is wrong. That whole premise is wrong. That whole thing is a violation and utter stupidity. Get out of here with that. But yet people followed it and people believed it to this day. Till this day, where now they done changed it, where, well, York wasn't born in Sudan. The nigga was born in Ghana. Really. For the last 30 years, we've been saying Sudan. Now the nigga born in Ghana. Yeah, he born in Ghana. And his mama told him, oh, the same mama that you said had him as damn near a preemie and got with some guy 1 week or 2 weeks after she got there. Those things are clear cut within Islam, prohibited. And if the people, as Abdul Malik was saying, if the people had readily had access to what Islam does say and what Islam does teach, they would have never followed it. Now, when me and Malik say that, if people had access to the information, I need to clarify something. Within Islam, you become a Muslim and whatnot, but you lead your daily life. That means you still got a grocery shop, worry about your kids' education, worried about these crackers in the street harassing you. You still have to worry about Donald Trump. You still have to worry about all those things. You know, you live a very normal life, you know, as compared to everyone else. It is nothing like your community where it's a constant nonstop. Did you get the new book? Did you get the new book? No, we don't do that. You know, we marry, we have kids, we sleep and we die. That's basically it. It's a regular life, you know, and throughout it all, we put God first in everything, right? So, so when I say if they had access to information, information was there. Information was there, but a lot of what York attracted was not the families, was not the people whose families had been Muslim in America, the African American families who had been Muslim for years in America, right, for generations and generations. York didn't attract them. York really attracted new converts, new people to Islam, or new converts who had not learned very much of what truly is Islam, or people from the Nation of Islam or God bodies or wherever. That's what York really attracted. York did not attract anyone of scholarship to his version of Islam. And if anyone has proof, please bring it. Please bring it. I'm sorry to cut you off, Malik. I hope you got your idea, your thought back together.
Well, that was a.
That's no
Oh, there you
problem.
go. Go ahead, Malik.
Um, you know, the reason why I keep harping on hadiths is that, my experience, my brother was an Ansar. When he left the Ansars and he came to what's called the Sunnah, that was the thing that I learned really from his experience. And then finally, I was a Muslim, and I would go to the tabernacles every Sunday faithfully. I didn't give a shit. Like, I would go there and I would just sit in the class, take notes. I didn't go there to debate because I had intentions. I wanted to go to the land. I was finally invited to go to the land. It was actually for Halloween to the event they had at Club Ramses. And when it came around, I wasn't able to. I was like still in high school. Um, but you know, this that's where they just went off, because if you're gonna follow, like the other day when I was on here and the guy was in the chat room and he was talking about Moors, okay? If you're gonna talk about that your way of life is Islam, you have to have you ha- you have to have both criterias. You have to have the Quran, you have to have the Hadith. There is absolutely no way of getting around it. If, okay, somebody says, "Oh, my way of life is Islam," and I follow the Quran, but I don't need them Hadiths. Okay, how do you get married? What is the rules of getting married? Does the woman even have to be present at the marriage, or does she? Does she have the option not to? What is the dowry? How many witnesses have to be there? A death, what they call janazah. What is
Mhm.
what is the understanding of the janazah? Can a non-Muslim be in the masjid when the janazah is taking place? And can a non-Muslim be in the ranks with the Muslims offering salat al janazah? What is the requirement of how do you clean the body? When does the body have to be buried? You know, wills. The Quran doesn't mention wills, but the Hadiths talk about wills. What's the understanding? If you divorce a woman, what is the ruling on the whole divorce process? How long after you divorce the woman do you still have to take care of them? Like there's tons of things. The Quran doesn't say you have to eat with your right hand and you clean, you wipe your butt with your left hand, or you clean your genitals with your left hand, you blow your nose with your left hand. The Quran doesn't say that. So where's all these people in the world getting this from? They're getting it from the Hadiths. So, they don't, I'll give you an example. And this is another thing too. Dr. Pork, okay, in the Islamic world, next to the Quran, the most authentic book is Sahih Bukhari Hadith. And I believe in Bukhari, there's about 4,456 Sahih Bukhari Hadiths. Now, Dr. Pork said that Imam Bukhari was a cracker and was from Russia. Here's the lie in this. First of all, he had it in a book. It was some book he did on Islam, and all he said was Imam Bukhari is from Russia. He was some cracker. He was some devil. He had no proof. He had no primary sources or anything to back this up. Bukhari is named Bukhari because he came from a town called Bukhara. And I believe Bukhara is in Iraq. So in Islam, a lot of people will be given a name after where they come from. Like there was a sheikh named Albani. Sheikh Albani was named Sheikh Albani because he was from Albania. If you were somebody from here, from America, and you went and you studied and you became a scholar, they may give you nicknames are very known in Islam. Prophet Muhammad was also known as Al-Amin. He was known as Mustafa. He was known as Qasim. He had many different names besides Muhammad. He had other aliases he had. So if you were somebody from here that studied abroad and you actually became a scholar, the Islamic world may call you Sheikh Amriki. Amriki means American in Arabic. So little things like that just to discredit the hadiths. So the people wouldn't follow that, because look, if the people had an understanding of the hadiths, there is no way in hell that he would have got away with the shit he got away with. At all. Nothing. Because they would have had the hadiths and said, well, no, the hadiths says this. And what this hadith is stating is correlating with the ayat from the Quran. Here's the footnote. Here's this. Here's that. And this scholar is saying this based on ABC. They didn't have none of that. They didn't have none of that. And he never had it. And Sheikh Dawood was really the one that kept him in check. I don't even think Sheikh Dawood probably knew what was really going on with this guy. But because he had such prominence and respect and he died, then he's like, fuck it, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to start teaching this. I'm going to teach you that I'm Al-Khidr, and Al-Khidr is Melchizedek, and Melchizedek and Al-Khidr is Michael. And,
they're all, yeah.
Like, when it comes to like aliens, right? There's a verse in the Quran in Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praises is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. The word worlds is denoting that there's other worlds. And that could mean on a macro and a micro level. So a Muslim wouldn't say that there's not other life form out there. They're going to say Allahu A'lam, Allah knows best, but whatever's there is there, and I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to speculate on it, because why would we be the only thing in existence? Because Allah speaks of the ghaib. He speaks of the seen and the unseen. He speaks of the seen and the unseen in the sense of of science, in the sense of spirituality, in the sense of Muslims believe in the jinn, Muslims believe in the angels, but also in science, you have bacteria, you have protons and neutrons and electrons, you have solid, liquid, gases, and plasma. You have all these things. You have air. You can't see it. It's unseen. But there's a way in which to reveal it. And some things are not going to be revealed. So this guy just starts going haywire, teaching all the things he taught. That if, for example, I don't know how they said it, but in their community, when they took Shahada, they didn't say wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. There was something that they added after wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. There was something they added after the Shahada, the declaration of faith as becoming a Muslim. So that in itself is a bid'ah, it's a religious innovation, and you've now added an additional, like Muslims believe, like if they lived in the time of Noah, they would say, I bear witness in the oneness of God, and that Noah is the prophet. Because that was the prophet, or that was the messenger that came at that particular time for that people. So Islam teaches that Muhammad is the last and final prophet and messenger. He's the seal. He's it. So there's nothing Islamically, there's no other person that's coming after. But when you have somebody like Dr. Pork, when he was teaching Islam, he's the Mahdi. But if the people were to study the Hadith in regards to the Mahdi, they would see, well, this guy's is the Mahdi. Because there's a series of events that has to take place. There has to be a Mahdi, there has to be a Khalifa, the Isa has to return, there has to be the Dajjal, the Antichrist, there's Gog and Magog, there's the beast, there's the sun rising in the west and setting in the east, which would be the finality that man would have any form of atonement, redemption to save himself. And when that occurs, that's it. And then here comes Yom Kippur. Like there's a series of events that come with this. And this guy is not the Mahdi. There's you look at a deviant group that's called what is it? They're from India, Lahore, or out of Pakistan. The Ahmadiyas.
Qadianis, yeah.
And you look at somebody like the Ahmadiyas, this is a group that still exists, and they believe that the Mahdi came and that there was a prophet after Muhammad. And this is another group that claims that they're Muslim and they don't accept the Hadiths. Good. Coming in early.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's another question. Did York's brother and mother believe all his claims, or were they just in on the hustle?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's been told to me. It's been related to me. Some of the. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been stated to me that York's mother beginnings were actually in Yoruba tradition, African traditions in Yoruba. Now, York speaks a lot about and against Yoruba cultural traditions. I don't know when the family came across to Islam or York's hustle. It's kind of hard to say whether or not they are actually in on it. One thing I will say is that I think the time is long overdue that they do come out publicly and make some sort of statement for the victims and the families, and in some things in which should be stated. is being demanded to be stated. York does have a brother by the name of Oba York. Oba York, at one point in time, him and York were together. They worked together with the community, but they split. Oba continued on within Islam and sort of just formed a, black nationalistic pride group community, which they still exist today. He severed ties with his brother as far as theological ties, but as far as family ties, they're still together. And as a matter of fact, I remember one time listening to Oba speak at a Nuwabian gathering, and Oba actually told on his brother. Oba actually stated that he was there when his brother was born, right there in Boston, Massachusetts, that he was there on the other side, and they wouldn't let him in, but he wanted to get in. And he's talking about his brother. And when my brother was born, he was very special. Now that's important because for years York talked about how he was actually born in Sudan, but his brother states on camera that he was present at his brother's birth at home in Boston, Massachusetts. So the answer to your question, I have no idea what's the family's position on it all, on the hustle, hiding the lies, in on it, or thoroughly disgusted by it all. I have not come across anyone saying anything, but blood is thicker than water, and so that's the best answer I can give. You have another question?
That was the only one that came up.
Okay.
Oh wait, let me check over here.
All right. So if you have one more, I'll do my best as far as answering, and but I'm gonna have to call it a night.
Okay, well it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
We've been going for 3 hours.
Okay.
Let's see, do we have any more questions? Anyone? Anyone? Did I miss any questions? Give them a moment to respond.
All right. And so if I can just uh, bring the topic back up.
Hmm?
Did York actually teach Islam? And the answer is no. Not only did York not actually teach Islam, but York did not actually teach Egyptology or any other school for that matter that York claims he has taught the people, or that the people claim to have been taught. York didn't teach any of that. And the best thing that we can do, like Malik says, he's not Muslim, but he is honest. And that is to say that, look, if you're going to tell a people's story, tradition, or even, even be antagonistic about it, if you're going to tell it all and tell it right. So York never taught Islam. York went into Malik. Sorry about that, Malik. Malik went into some details about it. I went into some details about it, and I have many more other things which are false that York taught. And the question to the answer is unanimous. No, he did not. So York starts off on bad footing, starts off with a lie, and 2017, the whole community is still built upon a lie. The emperor has no clothes. It's all a fraud. York is happy where he's at and thankful in 2017. He's not out on the streets having to defend himself and this foolishness that he taught.
Okay. So somebody wants to know your take on Malcolm X in York.
Oh, there is no take on it. Malcolm X and York do not intersect. York has written books where he claims that he was the one. If you read Malcolm X's autobiography, there's a section in there where Malcolm is making Hajj. He departs from the Nation of Islam and he decides to go to make Hajj. Not York. Malcolm X's sister is actually the one who financed this trip. So he's making Hajj, and he's unfamiliar with the language and all the different rites and rituals of how to make Hajj. And so within Islam, you have individuals that help you do these things if you're not native Arabic speaker or you're not familiar with the what you're supposed to do, right? York writes that he is the person that teaches Malcolm X how to make Hajj and accompanies him. And all of that is a lie. All of that. York wasted no expense at lying about himself, about Malcolm X, about anything. I mean, we got this YouTube, but York will lie on his own D. I'm telling you. So York makes up this story about teaching Malcolm X how to make Hajj. Malcolm and he uses verses out of Malcolm X's autobiography where Malcolm X speaks about how the person was a short person, didn't speak Arabic. York claims that he had to teach him and he could only speak Arabic to him, otherwise he wouldn't count. Blah 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 blah. When in fact, when Malcolm X made Hajj, York was actually in prison, I believe. Yeah, when Malcolm X makes Hajj, York is actually in prison and a teenager, an adolescent at the time. So there's no way possible that he could have made Hajj. He could have been the person helping him make Hajj. So there is no intersection between York and Malcolm X at all.
Okay. And then if you could describe York in one word, what would that word be?
uh, wow, that's a good question. One word. One word. Man, one word. For the sake of time, I'm gonna have to say Dajjal. Yeah. York is just a bad person. Yeah. Yeah. Not one to be dealt with. Don't waste your time.
Okay, so it is 12:23. We are gonna go ahead and close it down for the night.
All right.
I thank both of y'all for coming out. That was very thorough, very informative. Malik and Farooq.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You too.
Thank you.
Peace out, fam.
See you later.
Peace.
Peace, Malik.
I just want to say one last thing.
Uh-huh.
The only thing that holy tablet book is good for is if you ran out of toilet tissue and you gotta wipe your ass. And if you ran out of a Dutch or some roast paper, you need to roll up a fat.
Yeah.
Lord.
That book is garbage.
Straight up garbage. Or if you ran out of charcoal for the family reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
Or if you needed some, if you fried some fish and you needed some paper, grease.
So the Holy Tablet book makes the Book of Mormon look deep.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
All right. Peace out, fam.
Peace out.
Peace.
Thank the chat for coming out. Thanks for staying this whole time. Trinity, Open Scroll, Truth Forum, Melanated Agenda, Philip, Bismala, Living Soul Journey, Yatanya, Norma, Bismala, Philip, Majestic, Blissful One, Salima, Keisha Ray, Supreme Queen World, excuse me, Doran, I think Zeus was in here earlier, L Boogie, Rising Star, Derek Prince, Photography and Video, I Don't Buy Bull, Tico, Polite's Gold Shoes, Chemo, Conscious Speculation, there was somebody else in here. I can't even remember that. Oh, D Wiz too, but it was still somebody else. The lady. Witty Nefertiti, still somebody else. Soup Bone, still somebody else. I don't remember though. I already said Norma. If there is anybody I've forgotten, and I know there's one more person at least, I apologize. And I love you anyway, and I hope you still love me. But we're going to close this down for the night because it is 12:26 and I am getting kind of tired. So until next time, I don't know, we've got to schedule another interview. I'll probably come on sometime tomorrow. About what? I don't know yet. But oh yeah, the last shout out of the night is gonna go to me, CCCTV, the place where adults love to be, and we are going to close it out. And peace, love, and stay out this nasty weather. Night, y'all.